Our story begins with the events that unfolded at the luxurious five-star Grand Hotel Jawa. A young woman with crimson red hair was taking a shower in a pleasant bathroom filled with warm steam. The guy staying nearby in the room refused to invest a single cent until Jiao admitted she was wrong and agreed to become his girlfriend. Suddenly, someone began pounding loudly and insistently on the door, filling the young man with irritation. Hearing that the food delivery had arrived, Jiao's admirer quickly headed toward the apartment door. Standing before him was a young delivery worker with a calm expression, handing over the order. Unexpectedly, the very same girl appeared behind the man, wearing nothing but a towel wrapped around her naked body as she spoke to Fang Chao. Before she could even ask about the food delivery, the beauty froze in shock when she saw the two men standing in front of her. The moment he saw the girl, the delivery worker accidentally dropped the food bag onto the floor. In response to the dropped order, Fang Chao immediately started yelling at the worker, insulting him for being careless. Still standing there as a witness to the scene unfolding in the apartment, the girl suddenly recognized the delivery worker as her husband, Ye Chen, leaving the arrogant Chao stunned. Mocking the fact that the man he considered useless was working as a courier for Jiao's delivery service, Fang laughed at the irony of Ye Chen being the one who brought the food. The unfortunate man had worked for Jiao and her family for 3 years, cooking 3 meals a day, cleaning up after the dog, feeding the cat, never complaining and remaining loyal to his wife, yet she would not even let him hold her hand. Having always believed his wife to be a principled woman, Ye Chen was devastated by her relationship with another man, unable to understand what drove her to such betrayal. Repeating her husband's question with cruel sarcasm, the girl, just like her lover, called the poor Ye Chen nothing more than a worthless delivery driver. Calling her companion the CEO of an investment company, Jiao pointed out that Fang Chao, heir to the Fang clan of Yunzhou, possessed tens of billions in wealth, and only a rich man like him was worthy of such a beautiful woman, not some penniless courier. If you really are Jiao's husband, then just pretend Fang Chao fed the food to a dog. But if you kneel down and apologize, maybe I'll give you a 5-star rating, the billionaire declared. To the delivery worker, they were shameless monsters demanding apologies solely because of their wealth. Telling Jiao to forget about her husband, the lover was already preparing to spend the rest of the evening with her. But when Ye Chen painfully grabbed his rival by the throat and demanded he take his hands off his wife, Fang immediately screamed in pain and begged to be released. Stepping between them, Jiao instantly ordered her husband to let Chao go, threatening him if he ever dared touch the man she loved again. Ye Chen could not believe his ears when his own wife threatened to call security unless he removed his hands from the billionaire. A very long time ago, Ye Chen had first met Wang Jiao, and it was his grandfather who chose her to become his fiancée. Remembering his young bride, Ye Chen recalled how he once dreamed of spending a long and happy life with her. Thinking back on those years, the courier now saw himself as hopelessly naive and hoped the day would come when Wang Jiao would regret everything she had done. As Ye Chen left the apartment, he could hear his wife complaining about how she supposedly regretted things, though what she truly regretted was ever having a loser like him around. Back on the city streets, the courier greeted another customer over the phone, introducing himself as a delivery driver from Tuan Tuan Delivery. In response, a certain man addressed him as the third young master and announced that his 3-year trial as the Wang family's live-in son-in-law had officially come to an end. The next stage would involve taking over the business, and the family patriarch had already purchased the Huaxing Corporation, appointing Ye Chen as chairman of the board, a development the courier found rather satisfying. The man speaking with him asked about Ye Chen's relationship with the young mistress, and even suggested bringing her into the Ye clan as one of its heirs, but the courier refused. After finishing the conversation, Ye Chen continued making his way toward his next customer along the long city road. At 8 in the evening, Jiao wanted to open the door to one of the rooms inside the New Yunzhou residential complex. Opening the door and seeing Ye Chen, the girl angrily accused him of running away from home over something so trivial, but to the young man, betrayal was anything but trivial. To Jiao, there was no issue at all. She had no intention of apologizing to a husband who ate and drank at her expense, and who, in her opinion, should tolerate her mistakes regardless. Hearing such arrogant words, Ye Chen could no longer suppress his emotions and slammed his hands loudly against the table. He reminded her how he had endured her family for 3 years, the humiliation from her parents, the beatings from her uncle and his children, all while she ignored everything and refused even to let him touch her. Shouting in fury, Ye Chen reminded his unfaithful wife how deeply he had loved her, but from this day onward, his patience had finally run out. After enduring the entire outburst from her husband, Wang Jiayao was stunned to hear his cold and emotionless proposal for a divorce. Shocked by his words, the woman tried calling him useless and made several threats, before finally promising that she would not give him the Audi or the apartment. Sukhmilk of Dushe Ye Chen, who worked as a courier, had absolutely no desire to take the foreign car or the luxurious apartment. Furious, Jiayao agreed to the divorce, recalling her grandfather and the momentary madness that had overcome him when he married his granddaughter off to such a loser. Ye Chen silently listened as his wife described her family as a first-class clan with billions in assets, calling her husband a penniless nobody unworthy of her, and demanding that they go file for divorce the next day. However, Jiayao could not do it tomorrow because it was her grandmother's 80th birthday, a celebration the entire family would attend. And since the marriage had been arranged by their elders, the divorce would also have to be discussed with them. Without objecting, Ye Chen simply asked his wife to explain everything to her relatives as soon as possible, after which he would wait for her call. Walking behind the departing courier, Jiayao continued insulting him, convinced that he would soon regret the divorce and come crawling back within 2 days. After answering a phone call outside, Ye Chen was informed that the car waiting for him was just around the corner, and he spotted it almost immediately. Standing on the rain-soaked street, the courier saw a line of vehicles with drivers waiting for him, their young master. The first man approaching him, dressed in a suit and black sunglasses, offered him an umbrella, but Ye Chen immediately refused. Running a hand through his rain-soaked hair, the courier hoped the rain would cool his mind. When one of the men draped a coat over his shoulders, Ye Chen briefly ordered them to move out, and his subordinates instantly obeyed. The luxurious cars, their polished metal gleaming beneath the rain, began moving forward as cries of admiration erupted at the sight of the Rolls-Royces. The few pedestrians caught in the rain on the city streets could not understand what was happening as the luxurious Rolls-Royce convoy appeared before them. Watching from nearby, Jiayao could not understand why so many elite Rolls-Royces had arrived, as though some great tycoon had appeared, completely failing to notice her own husband among them. The world knew of the Rothschilds and other wealthy dynasties, but no one realized that the most mysterious family of all was the Ye clan, whose assets exceeded hundreds of billions, while its members remained hidden in the shadows. Stepping out of the expensive car, Ye Chen saw a man in a suit standing beside a helicopter, asking him to come closer. Under the unique system used to raise heirs of the Ye clan, candidates underwent brutal selection from the age of 3, studied martial arts and music by 5, and graduated from business school by 18. Ye Chen understood well the clan elder's method of tempering one's character through special trials. 3 years ago, his grandfather had placed Ye Chen into the declining Wang family of Yunzhou as an ordinary live-in son-in-law and servant. Ordering him not to reveal his identity, the young man had accepted the challenge. Recalling his very first meeting with his future wife Jiayao, the young man remembered that his decision back then had been entirely voluntary. The man in the suit welcomed him back, and for Ye Chen, everything was finally over now. Before the young man stood a massive palace glowing with brilliant light, and Ye Chen was finally returning home. The next morning at 10 o'clock, Grandmother Wang was receiving birthday congratulations at her residence in the Shishan Villas district of Yunzhou. The elderly Madame Wang, whose face lacked even the slightest warmth, listened to the wishes for a long life, while someone wondered where that piece of trash, Ye Chen, Jiayao's husband, had disappeared to. Lowering her head sadly, the unhappy girl reluctantly explained that her husband was absent because he was busy working. Wen Yan mocked the man's job as a food delivery driver, while Xiao Jai considered him a disgrace to the family after once seeing Chen delivering food while the man himself was driving a Maserati. Shouting angrily while holding her pet dog, Grandma Wang demanded that Ye Chen be dragged before her immediately, furious that he had completely lost his sense of respect. The miserable Jiayao hurriedly explained to her grandmother that Chen could not come today because they were getting divorced. Upset over her granddaughter separating from her husband, Madame Wang reminded Jiayao that this marriage had been personally arranged by her grandfather. Unwilling to let news of her affair spread, Jiayao blamed everything on her husband, claiming that he had abandoned her while insisting to her grandmother that she never wished to go against her grandfather's will, but that Ye Chen himself had taken a mistress. Shocked by what she heard, the birthday celebrant harshly criticized her son-in-law for cheating while being fed, clothed, and even provided with a car for 3 entire years. Xiaojai told the old woman not to be upset, but Jiayao herself admitted that she had never been intimate with Ye Chen, preserving herself while hoping to eventually drive away her naive husband, who in the end had supposedly awakened and found another woman. In Grandma Wang's opinion, even if all of that were true, Ye Chen still had no right to cheat, and she demanded that he be brought there immediately to answer according to the family's rules. Agreeing with her grandmother, Wang Jiayao picked up her smartphone and dialed the number of her still legally married husband. Seeing the incoming call from Jiayao, Ye Chen picked up the phone and immediately asked what she wanted. When his wife relayed her grandmother's demand that he attend the celebration, the young man refused without hesitation. After ending the call, Jiayao informed the old woman that her husband refused to come, causing Grandma Wang to explode in anger at the arrogance of her shameless son-in-law. Upon hearing Grandma Wang's order to drag Ye Chen there by force, Xiao Jai instantly agreed, seeing it as the perfect chance to loosen up his fists. Jiayao remained silent for a while, but then Grandma Wang decided to tell the relatives she had gathered there early about something important. Speaking to her family members about the sudden appointment of a new chairman at Huixing Corporation, Madame Wang worriedly admitted that she had no idea who this mysterious person was or where he had come from. The family company, Dingjing Real Estate, had always cooperated with Huixing, and they were currently discussing a 70 million financing deal. However, the contract had not yet been signed, so it was urgent to establish contact with the company's new chairman. Meanwhile, the suited man following the young master could not understand his boss's actions. The subordinate could not understand why his boss had changed back into his old clothes, but Ye Chen wanted to finish things properly on his final day working as a courier. For now, it was not the right time for the young man to reveal his true identity because of a dangerous enemy, and it was better to observe the situation from the shadows. From inside the expensive car driving along the wide city road came the voice of Wang Xiaojie, who had called Ye Chen. Wanting to speak with the man, Grandma Wang's eldest grandson, Wang Xiaojai, learned that Ye Chen was currently delivering an order to the Luyan residential complex. With an angry expression on his face, the young man demanded that Ye Chen wait there because Xiao Jai would soon arrive at the location himself. A short while later, the villain caught up with the completely unsuspecting food delivery driver on the road. Rolling down the window, Xiao Jai ordered the young man to get into the car because Grandma wanted to see him. Barely glancing at Xiao Jai, Ye Chen repeated that he was firmly determined to divorce Wang Jiayao, and even if Grandma personally begged on her behalf, it would all be useless. Shocked by his relative's words, Xiao Jai explained that Grandma intended to punish the delivery driver according to the family's laws, but Ye Chen could not understand on what grounds. The displeased eldest grandson rudely insulted Ye Chen, accusing him of having an affair despite being part of the Wang family, claiming that disgracing the family in such a way deserved death. Removing his helmet, Ye Chen expressed suspicion that such rumors had originated from Wang Jiayao herself, firmly denying everything. The very next moment, to the complete shock of the confused Xiao Jai, Ye Chen suddenly burst into loud laughter. After he stopped laughing, the young man thought of Jiayao as a shameless woman, wondering how someone could sink to such unbelievable arrogance. Xiao Jai could not understand what was happening to Ye Chen. The expression on the man's face had become terrifying. It was like the gaze of a ruler looking down on everyone around him with contempt. Thinking he must have imagined it, Xiao once again demanded that the young man get into the car, kneel outside the hotel to humbly accept punishment, and receive the official divorce decree, but Ye Chen refused. Clenching his fists, the villain stepped out of the car, insulting the delivery driver in an attempt to provoke him into a fight. Unexpectedly for the rude man himself, the calm Ye Chen suddenly delivered a swift and powerful kick. Red bruises instantly appeared across the villain's pale face from the sudden strike, and he screamed loudly throughout the street. Grabbing his injured cheek, Xiao Jai furiously called his opponent trash for attacking him and threatened to personally enforce the family's laws in Grandma's place by cutting the young man down. Holding a sharp dagger in his hand, the eldest grandson immediately lunged at Ye Chen, wildly swinging the weapon. Seizing the perfect moment, Ye Chen skillfully knocked the knife out of the villain's hand with a precise strike, leaving him unable to defeat his opponent. An instant later, the food delivery driver landed a powerful blow that sent the vicious relative crashing into a knockout, and the outcome of the fight was decided. Falling to the ground, Xiao Jai screamed in pain, while Ye Chen demanded that he return and tell the family that the delivery driver was not someone who could be summoned and dismissed with a simple wave of the hand. The young man clenched his fist, and if he chose not to obey, then nobody would dare order him around. As the delivery driver in the helmet walked away, the defeated Xiao Jai continued shouting insults and threats of revenge after him. Back at the Wanhao Hotel, events surrounding Grandma Wang and her closest relatives continued to unfold. The old woman, surrounded by her family, was informed that her eldest grandson, Xiao Jai, had returned from his trip to see Ye Chen. In Grandma Wang's understanding, the young man had carried out the task quite efficiently. The elderly woman stared in shock at her eldest grandson as he stepped out of the car, with bruises covering his battered face. When Grandma asked who had beaten him so badly, Xiaojai pointed toward the worthless husband Jia Yao had chosen for herself. Upon hearing the young man's confession, his father Wang Jiang was instantly filled with the desire to kill Ye Chen, calling him a piece of trash. Now resembling a swollen pig's head, Xiaojai tearfully begged his grandmother to call the police and have the delivery driver arrested. Looking away because it hurt too much to see her grandson in such a state, Grandma refused to involve the police to avoid spreading rumors, promising that Ye Chen would be properly punished. The old woman sternly ordered Zhiqiang to contact his acquaintances in criminal circles so they could brutally teach the delivery driver a lesson and drag him before her. Half an hour later, as Ye Chen approached his home in the Huaiwen residential complex, he encountered two strong men blocking his path. After confirming the delivery driver's identity, the intimidating thugs smiled viciously and ordered him to come with them. Suspecting they had been sent by the Wang family, Ye Chen refused to go anywhere, reminding them that today was his final day working deliveries. The gangster in the blue sleeveless hoodie took that as an invitation to fight, while his partner in the white t-shirt threatened to break Ye Chen's arms first and only talk afterward. A split second later, a fight broke out and loud screams were heard, associated with blows and pain. Continuing on his way, the delivery man, without any abrasions or bruises on his body, rubbed his eyes, glad that his order was not damaged. Suddenly, a rather rumpled bandit in a white t-shirt appeared behind him and demanded that the guy stop. Without turning around, Ye Chen punched the attacker again, but ended up dropping the bag of rice for the customer. The villain was already falling to the ground, and Ye Chen picked up the bag again, sighing with relief because the food remained safe and sound. The defeated bandits were left lying on the ground, and Ye Chen rode off on a motorcycle to deliver his last order for the day. At the Wanhao Hotel, Ji Xiao told his mother, Grandma Wang, about the mercenaries who had been maimed by Ye Chen himself, which left the old woman shocked. While the grandmother was indignant at the lack of someone to discipline Ye Chen, people were discussing the worthlessness of their son-in-law, admitting his mastery of martial arts. At this time, it was announced that Mr. Ma Kun, the general representative of Tuan Delivery in Yunzhou, would visit to congratulate the old lady. Ji Xiao whispered to his mother that the guest was Ye Chen's boss, but his son had an idea for the evil old woman. Ma Kun arrived with a smile, holding a package with a bottle of wine in his hands, knowing about the old woman's love for this drink, and gave her Romani Conti and congratulated her on her birthday. Hearing the sadness in the voice of the lady who thanked him, the businessman inquired about the reason for this, and Wang mentioned the misfortune in the family, although she did not like to talk about it. Approaching Ma Kun, Zhu Qiao began to quietly tell him about Ye Chen from his younger brother's family. Not understanding the reason for the guy's boldness, General Representative Tuan asked in amazement about Ye Chen, who had cheated on his wife and beaten his grandson. The evil Ma Kun complained about his lack of connections in Yunzhou, which meant he couldn't teach the ungrateful jerk Ye Chen a lesson, but Jicha was confident in his ability to help here. When the old woman's hated son Wang informed the businessman about the boy's job at Tuan Delivery, Ma Kun was very puzzled by what he heard. Looking at the person who shared the unexpected information with him, the businessman urged Ji Qiao to present this matter to him alone. After contacting Xiao Kai by phone, Ma Kun ordered him to check Ye Chen's room and current location and scheduled a delivery order to the Wanhao Grand Hotel. 15 minutes later, an unsuspecting Ye Chen was riding his work motorcycle along the road towards the city hotel. The guy called Mr. Ma reported his arrival with the order and asked him to go to the entrance of the Wanhao Hotel to receive the delivery. I'll be near the evil old woman Wang and her son, Ji Qiao. The general representative of Tuan ordered the worker to bring the order inside the hotel. Knowing Wanhao as the best banquet venue in the city, and suspecting the presence of the Jia Yao family inside, Ye Chen, in view of the ban on couriers entering there, asked the client to go outside. Looking at old lady Wang with an innocent smile, Ma Kun asked Ye Chen to stay outside and wait near the entrance. Ye Chen was allowing a trap to be set up ahead, and Ma Kun was asking Madame Wang, who was standing next to him, to come closer. Seeing his subordinate, the general representative Tuan shouted and ordered him to take off his clothes and badge, handing them to him. This unexpected scene left the confused Ye Chen amazed and unable to understand what was happening. Considering the delivery man an idiot, Xiaojai, who had been beaten by him, pointed at the guy's main boss, calling him the general representative of Tuan in Yunzhou, Ma Kun. If the employee doesn't believe what he hears, the businessman is ready to force the manager who hired Ye Chen to call the guy himself right now. Hearing the incoming call, Ye Chen heard his boss express confusion as to how he could anger President Ma, a guy who had already resigned. Ye-chen, who had been thinking about how to finish his career as a courier perfectly, was disappointed by the person who had ruined everything, and Ma Kun demanded that his former subordinate take off his uniform. The hard-working Ye-chen immediately unzipped his work jacket, while the persistent Ma Kun demanded that the young man take off all his special clothing. To the beaten Xiaojai, the boy resembled a dog, and Ji Chao insulted the unfortunate man who, being brave, beat his son, wanting to see his insolence. While tearing off his clothes, Ye-chen asked Mr. Ma again about the end of his representative term at Tuan Tuan Company this year. Mentally surprised by the dismissed employee's knowledge, Ma Kun wanted to know why the guy was interested in this question. With a barely perceptible smile, Ye-chen asked his boss not to go to the capital to discuss the contract extension due to the absence of a representative at the post. An indignant Ma Kun shouted about how it was impossible for Ye-chen to decide anything here, talking about his very strong relationship with Director Tuan Tuan. Old woman Wang, who joined the conversation, loudly demanded that her granddaughter's husband kneel down. First, he cheated on and betrayed Jiao, then he beat up the birthday girl's grandson. So today, the woman will apply family law to the scoundrel in front of all the guests. Smiling at the old witch's dreams, Ye-chen didn't understand the reason why he had to kneel. Reminding him of his entry into the Wang family 3 years ago and his agreement to accept the family law in the event of misdeeds, the old woman wanted to confirm the strength of this promise. Pressing his hand to his heart, the young man called out his words as Ye-chen, always possessing strength. Hearing the words of her granddaughter's husband, the old lady asked him to bring her the Wang family dragon ruler, after which Ji Chao rushed to carry out the order. Everyone present, looking at the ruler, seemed to have felt firsthand how their face would hurt for at least 3 days after being hit with such a thing, and after several attacks it would turn into a mess. The evil old woman Wang ordered her son to slap the unfortunate Ye-chen 20 times, and the hatred-filled Ji Chao headed towards the boy. Snatching up a ruler, Jiao Wang Juyun's father wanted to personally teach a lesson to his son-in-law, whom he allegedly raised so poorly. Suddenly, Jiao herself appeared, taking the dragon ruler in her hands, wanting to punish her own husband herself. Reminding his wife of her infidelity, Ye-chen was surprised by the accusations against him and subsequently intended to use force. Jiao was only forced to listen with sadness to complaints about herself as a supposed model wife, which could not be found even in 100 years. By calling Ye-chen her husband, whom she should beat if he deserved it, the girl considered the guy her property, and allowing others to beat him would mean losing her own face. Without listening to the girl, Xiaojai pulled out the dragon ruler with the intention of striking the delivery man 20 times, continuing to insult him. The villain rushed at Ye-chen and threatened to smash his face to pieces after their recent clash. Determined to punish the offender, Xiaojai was stopped the next second by Ye-chen, fearing another defeat. This was followed by a strong blow from the food delivery man to the face of the villain, who was at risk of suffering a second defeat in a row from his offender. For those present at the celebration of old woman Wang, it was wild to see the rain of blows from the family hanger on the rightful heir. The birthday girl, outraged by the boy's violence, pointed out the presence of officials and directors in the hall, so Ye-chen could have been arrested on the spot and thrown behind bars. In the guy's understanding, it was self-defense, and the guests could clearly see how Xiaojai was the first to attack the man with a weapon in his hands. The man with the mustache reminded the guy of his words about being ready to accept punishment, and Zhao could marry again. But breaking the marriage vow and being two-faced was a two-faced thing. Looking boldly at the people around him, Ye-chen agreed to accept punishment, but only if he was truly guilty. Holding Xiaojai, who had been beaten again, Grandma Wang accused the boy of having a mistress behind Jiao's back and beating her grandson, which was already quite a lot. Speaking about Jiao's 3-year fidelity and love for her, Ye-chen called his wife the cheater because she had rented a room in Fan Chao's Jiahua Hotel yesterday, suggesting to check the registration records. The people in the hall thought of Chao as the second son of the Fang family, agreeing with the long-circulated rumors about the beautiful Wang, who was not so untouchable. While they considered the Wang and Fang families to be excellent matches, even though Jiaya needed a divorce, she herself begged her grandmother and others not to listen to her husband's nonsense, since she was dating Chao for business. Unable to understand how business could be discussed in hotel rooms while wearing bathrobes, Ye-chen was certain that his wife intended to take everyone for fools. Turning around, the guests of the celebration were amazed to see the young Mr. Fan, who was just talking about him. The guy, holding a gift for the elderly birthday girl, looked at everyone present in bewilderment, not understanding the reason for such a noise. Zhao Yao accused Ye Chen's hanger-on of rumors of an unholy affair with Mr. Fang, urging him to explain their meeting yesterday as a business discussion. Upon learning of the gigolo Ye Chen's desire to expose his relationship with Zhao Yao to the public, Fang asked people not to listen to the delivery man, as the lady had just handed over the documents yesterday. Pointing out to Ye Chen his words about the affair between Zhao Yao and Him Fan, the latter asked for photos or videos as evidence, remembering how he did not answer the phone in the room. Considering it impossible for Ye Chen to get out of it, Fan assured people that he had been slandered by the guy who, working as a delivery man, had brought food to the room just yesterday. Xiao Fan never expected to see such rude behavior from the courier when he dropped the order on the floor, which resulted in the customer giving it 1 star and filing a complaint. Noticing the presence of Tuan Tuan's representative, Mr. Ma Kun, among the guests, Fan asked him to check the history of yesterday's orders. Taking hold of his smartphone, the businessman confirmed that Mr. Fan was right about Ye Chen receiving a low grade yesterday due to his rude behavior. The poor courier had to listen to the guest's complaints about his alleged vindictiveness, being compared to a rat in a gutter, and his low behavior because of the review. Finding his wife with his gaze, the young man inquired about her possible desire to explain to everyone the reason for the bag with the order falling down. Staying close to her lover, Wang Jiao attributed the delivery failure to the poor workmanship of her husband, who was nervous about what he had seen in the hotel room. Having burst out laughing after mentioning some hack work and ruined nerves, Ye Chen in his heart did not understand the prospects of a relationship with this womanizer. Turning towards Grandma Wang, the young man decided to find out if she had any evidence to support her words about the existence of his mistress. The evil old woman, after receiving such a tricky question, looked in bewilderment at her granddaughter and her lover from the Fan family. Having received no evidence, the birthday girl suggested closing the topic, but promised not to simply leave the beating of her grandson, Xiao Jai, alone. Having told about Xiao's attack with a knife and the possibility of confirmation by security and cameras, and that it was all self-defense, Ye Chen offered to call the police, but Ji could also go after his rival. Pointing her finger at the young man, the old woman reminded him of the 3 years when Ye Chen had lived off his family, but was now showing his teeth, allowing him to attack him. With a hand on his heart, Ye Chen reminded him of the respect he had for elder Madame Wang, promising not to touch Xiao Jai unless he attacked him again. Glancing at the woman, the young man said he had only one request, which was to obtain her consent to divorce Wang Jiao. Agreeing with her son-in-law, the old woman reminded the guests about the boy's adoption into the family 3 years ago, and this marriage was the will of her now deceased husband. According to the old woman, her granddaughter Jiao lived in misery for 3 years, and in order to fulfill the wishes of her deceased husband, Mrs. Wang constantly rejected the girl's parents' request for a divorce. Thanks to the love of her relatives, Wang Jiao held the title of the first beauty of Yunzhou, so the old woman did not want to explain who was unworthy of whom here. Due to Ye Chen beating the grandson of the old woman Wang, the slander of the granddaughter and the family friend Fang, the woman will not look back at her husband's will, not considering the guy as a son-in-law anymore. The birthday girl expelled the young man from their family, and Zhuri Chao asked the waiter to bring wine to all the guests to celebrate this event as well. Raising their glasses, the guests congratulated Mrs. Wang and Jia Yao, who had finally gotten rid of the trash in the form of Ye Chen, because now she could find an equal partner. The girl's mother, Su Lan, thanked everyone and shared a piquant detail with everyone, telling about Ye Chen and Jia Yao living in separate rooms for 3 years when the husband did not even hold his wife's hand. The very embarrassed girl looked at her talkative mother, not noticing the blushing men around her, who had learned of the beauty's innocence. Holding a glass of wine in his hands, Ye Chen mentally assessed his ex-wife's choice, allowing the family to evaluate her like a product on display for the most profitable sale. In his address to Wang Jiao, the young man congratulated her on receiving the long-awaited opportunity to find a man of her level. Giving the boy a dirty look, Jiao promised to put in a good word with her grandmother so that he wouldn't be kicked out if Chen knelt down and begged for mercy. With a smile on his face, the young man reminded the girl of her betrayal, indignant at her suggestion that she crawl at his feet. Ye Chen deliberately spilled wine on the floor in front of the shocked Jia Yao, not considering her worthy of witnessing such actions by her husband. The angry girl, calling Ye Chen a pathetic plebeian, shouted at the whole hall, considering him crazy. Turning to her grandmother, Wang Jiao spoke of the idea of simply kicking the guy out as too lenient a punishment for him. Agreeing with his sister, Xiaojai felt it was necessary to teach Ye Chen a lesson, and old lady Wang asked them not to worry, because offending their family was the worst thing. The old woman told the guests how Ye Chen had taken 3 years of her granddaughter's life and crippled her grandson, and that if the Wang family, who were respected in Yunzhou, had let it slide, they would have made things worse for themselves. The old woman asked the leaders of all the city's industries who had gathered for her birthday party to help her cut off the oxygen supply to the worthless Ye Chen. Considering Wang's desire to deprive Ye Chen of his livelihood, when he wouldn't even be able to buy bread in the city, and remembering his impudence to demand a divorce after disgracing the family, people didn't want to get involved in this matter. Chao Feng, who supported the Wang family on behalf of his clan, guaranteed that Ye Chen would not be allowed into Yunzhou hotels, and the guests knew about his family's ownership of a large chain of boutique hotels. Chao Fan looked at Ye Chen smugly, not only intending to sleep with his wife, but also wanted to make the young man crawl on his knees in the mud in front of him. Restaurant chain owner Zhong Wei, who had been in the industry for 20 years, supported the Wang family, promising that with his connections, it would be impossible for Ye Chen not to get a job at any establishment. Also in the case was Ma Kun from Tuan Tuan, who promised to cut off the oxygen supply of a guy who would not be able to carry boxes again, even for other delivery services. The doors of opportunity to work in hotels and deliveries were closed to the unfortunate Ye Chen, who wanted to know about the latest restrictions for him. When the general director of the Jingkuan TV channel promised the guy that there would be no chance to work as a waitress in bars and karaoke, he wanted more. Fearing that Ye Chen would end up in the hands of bodyguards, Xiao Jai reminded the guests of the boy's extraordinary kung fu skills, begging them to prevent him from being employed as a security guard for the rich. The excited guests remembered that there were a large number of rich people in Yunzhou, but no one could know them all and have authority over each of them. At the last moment, everyone in the room noticed the elegant young lady behind them. The people invited to the old woman Wang's celebration did not know this beauty, not remembering the moment of her appearance in the room. Zhikao, who was the first to wake up, was glad to see President Qin, amazed by her visit to the celebration and apologizing for not being able to meet her in time. Almost falling in love with the gorgeous guest, General Representative Tuan Tuan inquired of Mr. Wang about the lady's identity, wanting to be introduced to her. Knowing Ma Kun as a minor figure in Yunzhou, and therefore not recognizing the girl, Zhu Qiao named the famous vice president of Huaxin Company as Qin Hongyan. Ye Chen also observed that same incredible lady who held a high position in a large corporation. No one had seen the secretive head of Huaxin, and there was talk of a concentration of power in the hands of this lady who closes deals worth billions. She is second only to the president, but above thousands of others. Ye Chen, who continued to look at the striking guest, suddenly came to the realization that this girl belonged to his company. The Wang family knew 2/3 of the rich people in Yunzhou, but if there was one person who knew every rich man in the city, it was President Qin. Ma Kun considered the girl so beautiful that any rich man would dream of meeting her. To Qin Hongyan, who didn't appreciate the man's statement, it sounded like she had slept with the entire city, and Ma Kun immediately began to apologize. Chairman General Tuan Tuan, who never took his eyes off the girl, couldn't believe the beautiful vice president's ability to achieve everything so easily. Zhikao asked the girl to cut off Ye Chen's oxygen supply. Previously, he and his family had given her a lot of bribes in order to invest 70 million. Without responding to her friend's request, Qin Hongyan silently took a cigarette out of the pack to light it. Instantly, 4 of the men present took out lighters to help the beauty. Vice President Huaxin Corporation sat languidly on the sofa, while 4 men stood helpfully next to her with lit lighters. When the girl asked Ye Chen to come over to her, the guy appreciated the vice president's noticeable busyness, which he had never noticed, and didn't understand what to do now. Looking kindly at the young man, Qin Hongyan asked him to light her cigarette when 4 candidates were standing nearby. They were all stunned when they heard the vice president's request, not understanding why Ye Chen had been given such a high honor. Approaching the girl, the young man, with his hands in his pockets, was unable to light a cigarette due to the lack of a light. Surprised by this reason, the people nearby were amazed at Ye Chen's lack of insight in borrowing fire, refusing the chief goddess of the high society, Qin Hongyan. Rising to her feet, the luxurious lady walked towards Ye Chen, who was still standing. In a more serious tone, Qin demanded that the guy pronounce his name, but he did not immediately understand her question. When the vice president asked him again to give his name, Ye Chen recalled Wang Zhiqiang's words about the young man's name. Old Lady Wang's son, upon hearing his own name, immediately began shouting at Ye Chen, insulting him and demanding that he stop being rude to Lady Qin, but she waved her hand. Putting her hand on the guy's shoulder, the girl decided to give him a chance to survive, given that he and the new president of the corporation had the same last names. Qian looked at the young man almost with the gaze of a lover, calling him handsome and promising to hire him as a bodyguard if he obeyed her orders. The women in the hall didn't understand why President William was going to protect this guy and appoint him as her bodyguard, being such a luxurious lady. Jiao, who was standing behind the other people, could not understand the plans of this Qin Hongyan regarding her still husband. Visibly nervous, Ji Chang, surprised by the presence of the name Ye in the new President Huashan, asked Lady Qin about it again. After apologizing for her boss, Qin spoke of his desire to remain in the shadows, but she herself did not know the boss's full name, which she could not admit for fear of being ridiculed. In Ye Qin's understanding, Qin didn't know who he was. Otherwise, she wouldn't have made him light a cigarette, so he asked how she wanted to let him survive. The vice president demanded that the guy kneel down, bow to Madame Wang, Xiaojai and his wife, and after he apologized, promised to leave. When Qin promised to take Ye Chen as a bodyguard, with a salary of 200,000 a year, the guests were amazed at how she protected him, expecting to hear his agreement to guard such a beauty. Frightened by Qin's behavior, the unfortunate Jiao, noticing the guests' intent gaze toward Qin, told her grandmother about the beauty walking towards them. Old Lady Wang pointed out that Qin the bitch had a high rank, and it was no wonder she became vice president at such an age. The woman told her granddaughter about Qin's ability to never anger anyone without reason, and her ability to drive any man crazy. Much to Jiao's surprise, her husband refused the company's vice president's tempting offer. Qin Hongyan, who hadn't expected this, demanded that the guy repeat his words of refusal, mentally amazed at such impudent courage in front of everyone not to want to work for her. Turning sharply to face the persistent beauty, Ye Chen grabbed her by the ear and loudly and decisively repeated his refusal to comply with her demands. Qin Hongyan, flushed with embarrassment, held her ear and cried out in unexpected pain. Ji Chen called Ye Chen, the one who dared to raise his hand against the vice president, but the guy found her hard of hearing. Having assessed the young man's strong character, Qin seemed completely insolent after what happened at the festival. After contacting senior Madame Wang, Vice President Qin Hongyan joined the boycott, promising to block Ye Chen's access to Yunzhou. The guests laughed at the guy, calling him a worthless person against whom Qin herself spoke out. And now he would not survive in the city. Jiao also considered him guilty, since she offered a way out. When Ye Chen asked whether the girl was speaking on her own behalf or on behalf of the corporation, she said both. Reminding the girl that she was only vice president, the guy did not understand why she took the right to speak for the entire company. Behind the guest's back, she agreed with Ye Chen's opinion regarding Qin's high position. She couldn't speak for the president unless she was very close to him. Qin, who did not want to make this fact public due to Chen's desire to go underground, called the new president Ye her lover. This came as a complete surprise to the guy. He couldn't understand when he had become the girl's lover. She kept repeating the words about having an affair with the new head of the corporation, and Ye Chen was amazed at how she said it to his face without blushing. It is not surprising that the secret president Ye has a relationship with Qin, because they are a perfect couple, and Ye Chen is a nobody, but she could speak for him because of some kind of love between them. Rejoicing that President Ye was Qin Hongyang's lover, and therefore the Wangs could rest easy, Zhu Chang, remembering the bribes, counted on 70 million. Calling her man very serious, who clearly separated work and personal life, Qin hoped that the guy would be able to keep their secret. For Ye Chen, these revelations were deceptive. In his understanding, the girl was afraid of exposure, so she came up with an excuse. The vice president of the corporation looked at the guy in surprise, not understanding why he suddenly started laughing. Ye Chen had heard not only about President Ye's wealth, but also about his attractiveness. And Lady Qin, although beautiful, was unlikely to be looked at by such a businessman. Snapping her fingers, the beauty spoke of President Ye's love for her at first sight when he rented an island, held a ceremony, and begged her to be his lady love. The courier, not wanting to argue with this girl, perceived her revelations as nothing more than a vivid fantasy. Turning his attention to Wang Jiao, the young man suggested that she go with him to the registry office right away and received his wife's consent. Xiaojai asked them not to rush, suggesting that they divorce after the banquet. Now they would set the tables, and they would put a bowl at the entrance for Ye Chen to eat before leaving the city. After thanking Ma Kun for forcing the courier to take off his things, Xiao was overjoyed, and the company representative, delighted by the praise, regretted not recording a video to watch again to lift his spirits. Ye Chen, who clearly heard the conversation between these two people, came to the conclusion that it was necessary to finish with this Ma Kun. After dialing the number, Chen started talking about the delivery guy who always wanted to buy his grandfather lunch, recognizing him as Tuan Tuan's CEO, Wu Xiaohong. When the young man asked the assistant to call this guy to fire the Yunju representative, Ma Kun and the girls became alarmed. The man on the line took the order, talking about the guy's longtime dream of meeting Mr. Chen, and the fortune of this third person had exceeded 500 billion. Having positively assessed the financial growth of a person, Ye Chen would once ask to arrange a meeting with him for a feast, and the assistant would also accept this order. The guests at the party only silently listened to his business conversation with his subordinates from the company. Xiao Jai laughed, making fun of his acquaintances' so-called show-offs, highlighting the order to fire the representative, as if he thought he was someone special. The cheerful Ma Kun did not believe Ye Chen's words, considering them to be fairy tales, and urging the young man, whom he considered a country bumpkin, not to frighten anyone. An angry Kun called Ye Chen's grandfather a peasant, and President Wu owned hundreds of billions, so he would not treat his grandfather to dinner. Jiao considered her husband a disgraceful non-entity. Witnessing these conversations, the vice president of the Huashan Corporation only silently listened to all its participants. Hearing the call from his mobile phone, Ma Kun saw President Wu, with whom he had just planned to discuss the contract extension. The boss's words about revoking Ma Kun's license as the company's general representative in Yunzhou thundered like thunder. Ma Kun glanced to the side, unable to let the many people present in the hall, including Qin Hongyan, know about this. Considering this to be his end, Ma thanked the president in public for his new cooperation and spoke about preparing a contribution of 8 million. Having announced the dispatch of his manager and his unwillingness to cooperate with the representatives, and having heard Ma Kun about the party, the president repeated that the license would be revoked and that money would not help him here. As if not paying attention, Ma agreed with the boss, promising to work with him, and the angry boss repeated about the expiration of the contract and replacing Kun with another person. A nervous Kun said goodbye to the president, and Ye Chen, in view of the man's conversation with his boss, thought about the butler as if he had not yet called Wu Xiaohong. With a glass in his hand, Xiao Jai proposed a successful extension of Ma Kun's contract, to which the latter immediately and shyly agreed. The young man offered to drink to Mr. Ma, wishing him prosperity, to which the man expressed words of gratitude to the guy. With a degree of amazement, I watched Ma Kun, who was barely crying, and whom Xiao Jai called a sincere man after drinking a glass to the bottom. When Qin Hongyan asked about his well-being due to tears, Ma Kun tried to reassure her of his positivity, attributing everything to the strong vodka. When Ye Chen told Kun about the importance of being able to deceive, he did not consider his show-off to be effective, and everyone saw through his pretense, suggesting that he tell about his dismissal. Angry at Ye Chen for humiliating him, Ma explained his resignation by the new strategy of Tuan, where they do not refuse intermediaries, and not because of the guy's call to someone. Ye Chen quietly laughed, believing that Ma Kun's decision was the best for him, since then the young man would have far fewer enemies. Dissatisfied with Ye Chen's self-importance, the former Tuan representative perceived him as a bad courier, but people nearby admitted that the retired guy Kun was at fault. Against the backdrop of Qin Hongyan's puzzlement, some of the guests were afraid to go against Ye Chen, not wanting to suffer negative consequences for themselves. Jiao's mother asked the guests to calm down, because Mr. Ma's resignation was not connected with his unfortunate son-in-law, and the unfortunate man did not know President Wu with his rural relatives. The rest of the relatives, recalling the 3 years Ye Chen spent as a dependent, believed that he would not have suffered such hardships if he had known influential people. Old Lady Wang, who was celebrating her birthday, had to listen to guests talk about her gentle heirs, who did not tolerate sidelong glances, and about Ye Chen, who clearly had not humiliated himself for 3 years. Two guys grabbed Mr. Ma by the arms, asking him to leave with his drink, while Kun tirelessly showed off a bottle of Romani Conti from earlier years. While Ma was pleading with Mrs. Wang and the president, Ye Chen thought of them as corrupt individuals, not being surprised by Jiao's betrayal for money. When the chef began to bring ready-made dishes on carts, the hosts of the event asked the gentlemen to come to the table for appetizers, which would then lead to the main banquet. Wang Jiao asked her husband to eat first and then get a divorce, just so as not to ruin her grandmother's holiday. Sitting down at the dining table, Ye Chen began to taste the food, agreeing to wait until Jiao had eaten his fill. After touching spoons with Ye Chen, one of the ladies became indignant, considering the guy to be trash and perceiving her cutlery to be dirty. There were pieces of papaya fruit on the plate in front of the young man, and this girl heard how one can grow from it. Ye Chen chuckled and thought that this would help the lady, but she was angry and wanted to understand the man's rude hint. Towering over the food delivery man, the woman repeated her complaints about the strange innuendos in a rude tone. Ye Hun asked her to forget his words, promising to move the soup closer to the woman, and she was mentally angry at the lack of attention to her figure on the part of the young man. After asking her grandmother not to allow Ye Chen to eat at the table, the granddaughter said that since he had not given her a gift, there was no reason for him to be there. The old lady reminded him of the Wang family's ability to keep their word, so after dinner, there could be a divorce. The girl talked about her grandmother's 80th birthday and the guy without a gift. Mentally thanking the woman who forbade divorce, Ye Chen positively perceived her stubbornness, without which his mission would have failed. After announcing his official departure today over the phone, Ye Chen talked about his grandmother's anniversary and the gift he had for her, urging her to deliver it to Wan Hao. Jia Yao, who looked at her husband with disdain, perceived his words as an awakening of her conscience, but she did not want to accept his gift, considering it trash. Unsure of the value of the gift from the gigolo, Jia Yao demanded that the order be canceled and not embarrass herself, suggesting that, since her husband wanted to congratulate his grandmother, he should buy a gift for the servants. Seeing her husband eating something in the distance, the angry girl screamed, dissatisfied with his unwillingness to listen to her. 10 minutes later, a man in a delivery man's uniform entered the hotel lobby with a bag in his hands. The hotel employee, who had blocked his way, apologized and forbade entry to outsiders due to the Wang family's banquet, but the courier only wanted to deliver a gift. Soon, finding himself in front of the entrance to the hall, the courier asked a question to those present, wanting to know the name of the birthday boy. Dissatisfied with the courier's visit, Xiaojai spoke of his grandmother's banquet. The delivery man told him of his meeting with the owner of a Rolls-Royce, who was unable to show up but asked him to deliver a gift. The mention of the owner of an elite foreign car astonished the guy, but when he heard about the gift for his grandmother, he asked for it to be delivered quickly. Opening the box, Xiaojai couldn't wait to finally see the long-awaited gift for his relative. The boy looked with astonishment at the incredible icy jade that played with cold reflections before his eyes. He saw no flaws in the absolutely transparent stone, considering it to be of the highest quality and valuing such a bracelet at a minimum of 10 million. Other guests in the hall were surprised by the transfer of a 10 million item with the first courier they met, wanting to get to know such a bold magnate. While everyone present was discussing the luxurious jade for the elderly woman, Ye Chen was modestly eating the dishes from the banquet table. The old woman's astonished relatives and other people at the celebration called the bracelet the most expensive gift of the day. When the guests approached the senior lady about the identity of the donor, they asked her to introduce this person to them, but the woman herself did not know him. One girl admired the beauty of the bracelet, while others could not figure out who sent the bracelet if all the friends of the Wang family had gathered here today. Lost in thought, the beauty suspected that a secret admirer had sent the luxurious gift. Wang Yunyuan had a superb figure that any man would be fascinated by, but she was only 20, had no boyfriend, and any rich man would dream of such a lady. Ji Chao agreed with the idea of a fan, calling his daughter a beauty with millions of followers, and the gift could have been sent by some wealthy fan of hers. Qian congratulated President Wang in advance, whose future son-in-law was generous in giving gifts worth tens of millions. The man perceived the lady's words as flattering. Looking at them from the outside, they seemed to Ye Chen to be the kind of people who would rather believe in mythical worshippers than admit that he himself had given the gift. When the guy asked Wang Jiao if she had finally eaten, he heard an affirmative answer from his wife. If she ate, and he himself gave the gift to his wife's grandmother, he suggested going to the registry office to formalize the divorce. Having paid close attention to the young man's last words, Jiao asked again about the gift, wanting to know when he had given it. To further convince the girl, Ye Chen pointed to the magnificent jade, indicating it as his gift for old lady Wang. For the indignant Ji Chen, shame was gone, as he had not been able to earn tens of millions for such a gift in 3 lifetimes, and he was amazed at the guy's audacity to say such a thing. Guan Yuan asked her sister to calm down her loser, considering the gift to be the work of her fan, and Xiao Jai pointed out the poverty of Ye Chen's family, who appropriated someone else's gift. Having demanded to go to the registry office quickly, Jia Yao spoke of her great reluctance to be the wife of such a worthless man for even a second longer. Turning to the elder Mrs. Wang, the young man reminded her of how they had been a family for 3 years, and on the occasion of her birthday, he gave her a jade bracelet. The disgruntled mother-in-law demanded that Ye Chen stop acting and leave, considering this parasite to be a disgrace to the Wang family. Xiaojai asked the guy to leave Yunzhou by train immediately after the divorce, not wanting to see him in the city anymore. As he headed towards the exit, Ye Chen spoke about his own choice to decide whether to leave or not, and no one had the right to tell him what to do. Once outside the walls of the huge hotel, Ye Chen approached an expensive car on the side of the road. Xiao Fang, who was sitting in the driver's seat, reminded Ye Chen of Jia Yao's words about him being unworthy of sitting in a foreign car, suggesting that he ride a rental bike. The young man only had to listen to his lover's promises to wait for him at the entrance to the registry office. Ye Chen greeted the taxi driver who arrived and told him that he needed to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The door to the office where Ye Chen was supposed to go was open, and there were tables with computer equipment in the office. The guy was happy to receive the divorce certificates. After 3 years, he was no longer the son-in-law of a dependent. Seeing the next challenge as a business, Ye Chen wanted to devote himself to his career, and Jia Yao and Fang were already calling him an abandoned woman, not a hanger-on, which was more shameful. Turning to his ill-wishers, the young man did not want to listen to them, because now he was happy, having nothing in common with them. The guy's ex-wife shouted insults at him as he left in a taxi, calling him a pathetic loser and useless trash. Sitting next to her lover, she asked him to follow Ye Chen, wanting to know whether he would leave the city or stay. As he stepped on the gas pedal, Fang Chao assumed his former rival's intention to head to the station. Catching up with the taxi where Ye Chen was, Jia Yao's rich lover reminded him that the guy's oxygen supply in Yunzhou was cut off. He had no money, and if he left, he would die of hunger. Mentally agreeing with Chao, the girl recalled her ex-husband's expression, which had struck her as suspicious. Mr. Fan, who was keeping a close eye on the road, saw the taxi move onto the wrong road leading to the station. A frightened Jia Yao suggested that Ye Chen go to the airport, but Chao disagreed, pointing to the path to Westlake. The girl's thoughts included a guess about Ye Chen's intention to stay, and the cars continued to drive on the city road. In Chao's opinion, their fool might have been looking for a cheap hotel, but thanks to his connections, the rich man guaranteed that the guy would not be admitted to any hotel lower than 4 stars. 10 minutes later, a taxi will take you to the luxurious Four Seasons Hotel on the shores of Westlake. Looking up at Ye Chen as he climbed the steps, the lovers assumed the guy wanted to work as a waiter at the hotel, insulting him along the way. Jiao remembered Ye Chen's family's words about how it was impossible to get a job as a servant, but he still tried, not caring about people's connections. Mocking the guy who doubted his strength, Chao contacted the hotel manager, Xiao Cheng, telling him about the man who had come to get a job. Gathering all his hatred, the evil rich man asked his friend to immediately throw out a guy named Ye Chen, who had entered the hotel. Suddenly, Changfan's face changed dramatically, as if something strange had happened, causing Jia Yao to question him with concern. Referring to the manager's words about the lack of job applicants, Fan could not understand the purpose of Ye Chen's visit, if not to work at the hotel. Looking at Jia Yao, who was staring at him, Chao Fang suddenly suggested that their opponent would be staying at an expensive hotel. The girl who excluded this was talking about the price of a night in a hotel being 8,000, and during the divorce, she took Chen's cards away, leaving him a couple of hundred and a small limit on his credit card. Having decided to stop thinking and speculating, Fan suggested that the girl go to the hotel and ask the administrators about everything. In the Four Seasons lobby, Xiao Chang told Chao about Ye Chen, who had so interested the lovers, who had actually just moved in. According to the administrator, the new client paid for 7 days at once, shelling out over 50,000, causing a storm of surprise among the newcomers. Amazed at how the scoundrel had given away 56,000, Chao accused Chen of stealing the money, to which she agreed, suspecting her ex-husband of concealing money from groceries and dog food. According to a hotel employee, Mr. Ye Chen was not staying in a regular room, but rented a presidential suite. These words thundered like thunder to the astonished rich Chao Fan and his equally wealthy lover. Knowing that the price of a night in the presidential suite was 80,000, Chao calculated the sum of 560,000 for a 7-day stay in such a room. Turning to the puzzled Jia Yao, Fang asked her to confirm his belief that Ye Chen could save $500,000 on dog food. Chao inquired again with an enraged tone from the hotel employee about Ye Chen's payment of 560,000 and received confirmation of this. Wang Jiayao was just staring at the lobby ceiling in amazement when the receptionist remembered the tip from the wealthy guest. Suddenly, the girl started yelling at the hotel staff, calling them crazy and accusing them of taking money from the Wang family. Walking away from the reception desk, Fan asked Jia Yao to forget about the tip, wondering where Ye Chen got that kind of money, since he couldn't save up $1 million just from change from food. Recalling her ex-husband's frequent presence near her grandmother, supposedly caring for the dog, the girl suspected the guy of stealing several antique vases. Hearing this, Fan immediately urged his companion to urgently call home to check on her things, and Jia Yao picked up her smartphone. The celebration of Grandma Wang's 80th birthday continued at the Wanhao Grand Hotel. The guests, including President Teng, continued to wait for the mysterious giver of the bracelet, unwilling to leave without looking at the wealthy, celestial being. Tapping her fingers on the table, Vice President Jin Hongyan was puzzled by the mysterious man's continued absence. According to the deputy head of Huashan Corporation, even taking into account the traffic jams on the road to Lake Shihi, this person should have made it. Suddenly, the thought of Ye Chen, the person who gave the jade bracelet, and not any other person, came into the lady's head. The ex-mother-in-law picked up the phone, needing to answer her daughter, and immediately began inquiring about the divorce from the worthless Ye Chen. Worried, Jia Yao asked her mother to urgently go to her grandmother's to check the antiques and paintings, accusing Ye Chen of stealing the items and selling them. The mother, screaming into the phone, could not believe that the vile scoundrel Ye Chen could rob Grandma Wang. Qin Hongyan sighed with relief and lit a cigarette, almost starting to perceive the guy as an important person, but he turned out to be an ordinary thief. Rising from her seat, the lady began to say goodbye to the elder Mrs. Wang due to the need to attend to business. While escorting Qin Hongyan to her car on the street, the birthday girl, along with her son Ji Chao and other people, spoke of their hope to receive funding from her if they received a positive response. The other guests also began to say goodbye, having given up hope of seeing the mysterious rich man today. Returning back to the hotel hall, old lady Wang asked her relatives about identifying the robber. The daughter relayed Jiao's words about settling Ye Chen in the presidential suite for a week, spending almost 600,000 on it, and the girl believed that this was money from the sale of their family's belongings. Hearing all this, the woman screamed with strong indignation and outrage at the parasite Ye Chen's actions. Not ruling out the possibility of a mysterious guest visit, and not wanting to give the worthless Chen Yu a chance to ruin the evening, the old woman asked Ji Cheng and Yuan Yuan to stay and sent Xiao Jai, Su Lan, and Zhi Yuan to the villa for inspection. After a short period of time, the car with the old woman Wang's relatives approached the Shishan villa. Once inside, Xiao Jai suggested that his uncle split up, handing over the room with the antiques to him, while the guy himself checked the one where they were standing now. After 20 minutes of intensive monitoring of the room, Xiao Jai was able to ensure that all things were safe and sound. The uncle's nephew, who was interested in his affairs, had everything in order. Xiao found everything in its place in the treasury and other places, which meant that nothing had been stolen from the grandmother. Based on the results of the investigation, Xiao Jai concluded that there was no evidence of a crime on the part of Ye Chen. Unexpectedly, he told his uncle about his intention to check everything again in order to be absolutely sure that the things were safe, and the relative followed the guy's example. Taking the watch of his late grandfather, one of only 48 pieces produced in the world and worth over 5 million, the villain congratulated Ye Chen on stealing it. With feigned indignation, Xiao Jai returned to his uncle, telling him about the disappearance of the watch in the room where he had just been. Seeing the empty box, the angry relatives insulted the unfortunate Ye Chen, accusing him of embezzling money for a luxury hotel room. Juan immediately called his mother and told her about the loss of his grandfather's Richard Mille watch. The enraged old woman Wang demanded that Ye Chen be seized and dragged to the inn to be subjected to the most severe punishment by cutting off his hands. Turning to his nephew, the uncle conveyed his grandmother's order to go and catch the villain Ye Chen, causing the boy to be perplexed. Unwilling to be hit by the strong Ye Chen again, Xiao Jai, holding his red cheek, suddenly began to complain of pain. As he climbed the steps, the young man spoke to his uncle about the urgent need to go to the hospital, offering him to go first and promising to join him later. Zhiyuan picked up the phone and wanted to check with Jiao whether she was still at the Four Seasons Hotel. After hearing her uncle's report about the disappearance of a luxury brand watch worth 5 million from her grandmother's house, the girl broke out in a cold sweat. When Chao Fang approached his beloved, he learned of Ye Chen's theft from her grandmother's house, which sent her into a fit of unbearable anger. The companion did not understand his lady love when she resolutely demanded that the administrator name the room where Ye Chen was staying. Turning to Chao, Jiao declared her intention to capture the villain and bring him home, since he had stolen a watch worth 5 million from her grandmother. Surprised by the girl's excitement, Fan suddenly thought how happy she was to have the opportunity to see Ye Chen. Pressing Jiao, the nervous Chao, speaking of the hotel owner as a serious person, advised the lady not to make a scene here, suggesting it would be better to call the police. Suddenly pushing the gentleman away, the indignant girl was about to go to the thief herself, accusing Chao of cowardice. Once outside the presidential suite, an enraged Jiao began to actively knock on the door, demanding that the thief Ye Chen open it immediately. The young man who appeared at the door of the room was outraged by the appearance of this restless woman who was looking for him immediately after the divorce. At this moment, Ye Chen seemed to resemble the ancient god Zeus, appearing before the lady in such a form. A little embarrassed, Jiao looked at her, now ex-husband, unable to take her eyes off his body. While Wang Jiao was surprised by the guy's strong abs, he asked his guest the purpose of her unexpected visit. If she had known about this earlier, she would have forced the guy to walk around the house without a shirt, but she only asked out loud about stealing an expensive Richard Mille watch from his grandmother. Ye Chen didn't understand what the girl was talking about. Zhao demanded that he not pretend, again telling about the 5 million watch stolen from his grandmother, suspecting the guy of it. Gesturing towards the room's furnishings, Jiao said that even she hadn't lived in one like this. Otherwise, how would Chen have gotten the money for the presidential suite? Surprised by the Wang family, the guy knew how she took credit for all the work and looked for others to blame for problems, so he denied the accusations, demanding that Mrs. Wang leave. With eyes wide open in surprise, the girl looked at the guy who had never called her that before, feeling almost pain. As a husband, Ye Chen always called his wife by name when giving her flowers, or called her beloved wife when inviting her to a restaurant, or called her goddess. A frustrated Wang Jiao didn't understand why Ye Chen was trying to kick her out of the room, suspecting the presence of another woman there. Thinking of the girl as being a little sick, Ye Chen threatened to call security if she didn't leave. Besides, it didn't matter to Jia Yao whether there was another lady in his room or not. Unhappy with Ye Chen's refusal, Jia Yao wanted to give him a chance to come back, admit his guilt, accept his grandmother's punishment, and be done with it. But now she's ready to call the police. After asking the guy not to deny the fact that she had warned him, Jia Yao threatened him with 15 years in prison for stealing a watch worth 5 million. Before the girl could finish her sentence, demanding that her ex-husband get down on his knees to avoid punishment, the doors of the room slammed shut in front of her. Thinking of Jia Yao as the one who took advantage of her ex-husband's love by demanding that he apologize on his knees, Ye Chen didn't know why love made people so pitiful. At that moment, the girl was screaming, trying to get through to Ye Chen to call the police so that he could get ready for prison. At this time, in the banquet hall of the Grand Hotel, where the birthday celebration of old lady Wang was taking place, the birthday girl's enraged voice was heard about her granddaughter calling the police. Dissatisfied with her granddaughter's behavior, the elderly woman sternly reminded her that all family affairs were her own personal decisions and that there was no point in airing dirty linen in public. Sulan explained her daughter's actions by the possible stubbornness of Ye Chen, and since he was no longer their relative, the family law could not be applied to him. Agreeing with her daughter, Mrs. Wang believed that Ye Chen was destined to rot in prison. After all, he had tarnished their family's reputation. 10 minutes later, 2 law enforcement officers asked Miss Wang Jiao to repeat the information about Ye Chen stealing a $5 million watch. Calling the guy a son-in-law and a hanger-on, Jiao told about their divorce, the ex-husband's theft of a watch, its subsequent sale, and the renting of a luxury apartment where he took girls, demanding that the scoundrel be arrested. In the hotel lobby, one of the law enforcement officers demanded that the administrator call Ye Qian to come downstairs. A guest in an expensive hotel room was sleeping on a large sofa when the telephone suddenly started ringing. Unhappy with her ex-husband's disregard for her, Jia Yao was indignant, assuming that Ye Chen was afraid of the theft, which is why he was afraid to answer the phone. Heading towards the elevator, the law enforcement officers were going to go up to Ye Chen's room with Wang Jiao's consent. When the young man in the robe opened the door of the room, he heard the policeman ask if he was Ye Chen. Introducing himself as the local department head, surnamed Li, the guard informed the boy about Miss Jia Yao's statement about the theft of a watch worth 5 million, but Ye Chen denied everything. Li relayed Jia Yao's words about the guy being a poor son-in-law with no money, but then working as a courier and not receiving a penny after the divorce. Calling the presidential suite a luxurious place where a night cost 80,000 and the guy rented a room for a week, Li wanted to know the source of the money if Chen wasn't stealing. The elite room guest turned around and headed towards the room, asking the law enforcement officers to wait 1 minute. Approaching the desk, Ye Chen took some papers with the subsequent goal of showing them to the arriving law enforcement officers. When showing Li's boss the agreement for the transfer of shares of the Huaxing Corporation, the young man claimed to be the largest shareholder and the general director of the company. Looking at the business card, Li saw a black metal card with gold embossing, encrusted with diamonds worth 10,000 yuan. This was too much for Li's young partner, so the boy assumed that there was a fake in front of them. Li wanted to check Ye Chen's background through the commercial database Heaven's Eye, which can check the history of companies and information about defaulters. While naming the founder of the base as Zhang Chao, a university friend of his brother, Chen did not officially take up the position, not wanting to be exposed prematurely, so he asked to conceal his information, but was willing to reveal it to the police. During the call to Dr. Zhang, Chen told him about the police's intention to check him through the celestial eye, asking his friend to open the young man's profile for 10 minutes. 1 minute later, Ye Chen was already offering law enforcement officers to check his personal information on a commercial portal. Both law enforcement officers typed the words Huaxin Corporation into the search bar to obtain the information they needed. Finally, among other information, an image of Ye Chen in a suit with his initials and title as the CEO of Huaxin appeared. Looking again at the young man, the police were perplexed, even admitting that the database had been hacked. Ye Chen had no intention of revealing his capital, but if the inspectors still didn't trust him, he would have to resort to the following measure. Having opened a bank account on his device, the guy offered to let law enforcement officers look through it. Seeing the completed quick payment of 560,000 yuan and the balance of 10 billion, the police were truly shocked. When Chen and Jiayao got married, they signed a prenuptial agreement, and when they divorced, the wife didn't check how much property her husband had, and yet told the police about his cards and money, comparing it to the Wang's wealth. Looking at the policeman, the new head of the Huaxin Corporation wondered if he would really bother stealing a 5 million watch. Impressed by what he saw, Chief Li assumed that Ye Chen was the heir to a powerful clan, but did not understand the reasons why he became a hanger-on for the Wang family. Hoping that the police would keep the secret, Chen explained everything as the will of the clan, but he had no control over himself. The guy wouldn't want the Vans to know about everything. Knowing about the quirks of the rich, Department Head Li reassured Mr. Ye, promising him not to divulge the secrets of his private life. Already in the corridor, the law enforcement officers apologized for the visit, and Ye Chen, who responded with kindness, wished the police officers a safe journey. A few minutes later, in the hotel lobby, the police advised Jiayao to return home and better look for the watch, which could have been elsewhere, since Chen had not taken anything. Fang Chao couldn't understand how this was possible, and Jiayao was indignant that the police took her ex-husband's word for it. If he hadn't stolen anything, then where had he gotten the money for the expensive hotel? Hearing the girl describe Ye Chen as a penniless courier, the police officers chuckled to themselves, remembering the 10 billion in the guy's account. Without good reason, the guards could not detain Mr. Ye, and Chief Li offered to give them a video recording of the theft or proof of the sale of the watch and the receipt of money. In response to Li's advice not to call her ex-husband a beggar or trash, since such words did not paint her in a good light, Jiayao continued to prove that she was supposedly right and that she would not have left Chen if he had been a little more successful. The surprised policeman couldn't believe that it was the girl who left her husband, but she confirmed it, and her husband was clearly kicking himself in Jiayao's understanding. Lady Wang looked questioningly at the police officer, shocked by the way she abandoned the billionaire, because here she was the only one who should be sorry. Suddenly, the unfortunate Jiayao inquired with the law enforcement officers about the possible presence of a strange woman in Ye Chen's room. With a slight bow, Police Chief Li firmly announced Ye Chen's presence in the room, splendidly alone. With a touch of romance, Wang Jiayao began to talk about the remaining remnants of love her ex-husband had for her. As Fang Chao watched the two police officers leave, he didn't understand why they were so polite to Ye Chen. Hearing the call, the girl answered the caller, Xiao Jai, who was interested in the possible detention of Chen by the police called by his sister. After leaving Fang Chao, the girl told her brother about the law enforcement officer's reluctance to detain Ye Chen without evidence. Not understanding what was being discussed, Xiao Jai thought about evidence of theft or a receipt for the sale of an expensive watch. Holding the blue box in his hands, Wang Xiaojai knew that he could not provide evidence since he had the watch. Xia still wanted to find someone who would confirm the purchase of the watch from Ye Chen, so he promised his sister to arrange everything and not worry about sending her ex-husband to prison. Hearing her brother's assurances, Jiayao was a little puzzled and continued to stare at the phone stupidly for a while. Thinking about brother Xiao Jai and his likely success in sending Ye Chen to prison, Jiayao didn't know what the consequences of all this might be. In the midst of her endless thoughts, Jiayao recalled how Ye Chen had once asked her if she liked the way her hair was curled, and she had answered positively. Lost in almost pleasant memories, Wang Jiayao didn't notice the slightly embarrassed look Chao Fang was giving her. Holding the girl close, the young man invited her to spend the night at the Four Seasons Hotel. Unexpectedly slapping the guy in the face, the enraged lady accused him of being unable to deal with Ye Chen alone, who was already trying to get into her bed. Holding his red cheek, Fang Chao mentally promised to deal with Ye Chen when he left the room, because of him, the rich man was left without the love he desired. Manager Xiao Cheng quietly began to praise his comrade for choosing such an incredible lady, whom he called a chick. Fan, who had grabbed the administrator abruptly, demanded that he be informed immediately if Ye Chen left the hotel, and the frightened Xiao promised to do so. The hotel staff present at 6 in the morning were almost in shock when they saw the elegant guest in front of them. To the girl at the reception, Ye Chen seemed like a real powerful boss with a completely different aura from yesterday, with whom she would definitely fall in love, envying the guy's future wife. Walking towards the door, manager Xiao Cheng quickly informed Fang Chao about Ye Chen, who had left his hotel room. After getting into the car, Zhao followed the guest, being on his tail, and telling Fang Chao about the client's direction toward the center. 20 minutes later, a taxi stopped in front of the Husheng Corporation building, and Ye Chen got out. Remembering Qin Hongyan, who had cut off his oxygen supply yesterday, the guy thought with irony about how the girl would react to him now. Fang Chao, who was resting carefree on his bed, listened to Xiao's report about Chen's trip to the company office, not understanding the purpose of such a strange visit. Remembering Chen's threats to block all paths for Chen, Fan allowed for revenge on the part of his acquaintance. But for himself, he perceived the situation as a good chance to get closer to the beauty. Hearing an incoming call on her smartphone, Qin Hongyan picked up the gadget, not knowing who had decided to call her. They introduced themselves to President Qin. Chao reminded her how yesterday at Madame Wang's banquet, he raised a toast to the beauty, and the girl was interested in the purpose of his early call. While talking about the Wang family's son-in-law, Ye Chen, Fan reminded the girl of the general protest against him, and today this guy came to the office for possible revenge. Lady Hongyan asked her comrade not to worry, pointing out that the access control system and security were working, so the villain would not be able to enter the office premises. Fang nervously reported to Qin that Ye Chen had passed the turnstile with the card and gone upstairs in the elevator, so it was dangerous for the girl to go there if the villain was already up there. Hearing these words, Qin was shocked, not understanding how the scoundrel had a map of the Huaxing Corporation on him. Chao told about Chen stealing watches from the Wang family and selling them for 5 million, so he had money and could buy a pass from the company employees. Chao, while assuring Qin of his concern for her, called the girl a beauty and would have perceived it as a real tragedy if the villain had injured her with a knife. Getting up from the sofa, Qin Hongyan expressed words of gratitude to the man for the warning, promising to immediately send security to check. Fan spoke of wanting to come to the corporation's office soon to help the girl, but he only heard beeps from his smartphone speaker. Having called Assistant Rongrong, the beauty ordered him to immediately check the company's office, looking for suspicious individuals, and if they were found, to call the police. Half an hour later, a striking young woman, known to the security guards as Secretary Zhou, appeared at the Huaxing company office. After punching her pass through the turnstile, Zhou Rongrong, Qin Hongyan's secretary, arrived at work with her long dark hair and slender figure. To one guard, she still seemed innocent and charming, although she was far from Qin's charm, as the second thought, but she pleased him with her simplicity. After opening the doors, Zhou Rongrong began to question the intruder about his entry into the office, wanting to know how he broke into the company and why. Yezhin, who was studying the documents, looked up from the papers and calmly asked the girl about her identity. Giving her name, the beautiful Zhou Rongrong spoke about her position as the secretary of the president of Qin in the Huaxing Corporation. It was a mystery to Ye Chen why Qin, a woman, would hire such a secretary, as she was more of a man's type. The guy had some strange thoughts about Qin's sexual orientation, and Zhou at that time demanded to know the purpose of his visit to their company, inquiring about the course of his thoughts. Ye Chen briefly introduced himself and explained to the girl that from now on he was the new president of Huaxing Corporation. The secretary apologized to Ye Chen, regretting opening his office door with a key, as only the president could do that, speaking about the order to find strangers in the building. Taking the girl's words as an attempt by the Wang family to spy on him and outraged by the family's evil behavior, Ye Chen asked the secretary to return to work. Knowing President Qin as the first beauty of business-minded Yunzhou, Chen asked to invite her to his office to admire how attractive she was. Entering the women's restroom, the girl called Qin, who immediately tried to find out if there were any strangers in the company office. While driving the car, Qin learned of the arrival of not a stranger, but the new President Yi, who wanted to see Miss Hongyan, who was already astonished by this news. Having promised the secretary that she would come immediately, Qin hung up, surprised by such changes in the corporation's work. The girl's red car was quickly driving along the city road, hurrying to return back to the company office. When the lady entered the lobby of the business center 10 minutes later, Secretary Zhou immediately called out to her, delighted at her boss's arrival. When Chin asked about the president's whereabouts, Yejo pointed to the office, reminding him of the boss's request to come to him as soon as Lady Hongyan arrived at work. On her way to the new director's office, Chin saw some of the company's female employees, not understanding the reason for their appearance at such an early hour. According to Zhou, the reception chat announced the arrival of a new handsome general manager, which is why the workers came running. Turning her head toward the secretary, Chin wanted to know her opinion regarding the attractiveness level of the new boss. To the somewhat embarrassed Zhou Yechin, he was more handsome than movie stars, very young, looking about 23 years old. Amazed at the director's youth, Chin herself received the position of vice president at 32, which was rare, and Ye was still very young. Having ordered her subordinate to gather all the employees, Chin was dissatisfied with their reaction to the new manager, as they were only bringing shame on their department. To soften the situation, the secretary tried to verbally distance herself from such an overbearing boss, since only Vice President Chin was comparable to him. According to Zhou, President Ye called Chin the first beauty of Yunzhou, and his early visit could be explained by his desire to see her, but Hongyan asked him not to say such nonsense. For Chin, who moved in business circles, there was no man she could not handle. He might be unattainable for young girls, but for her, he would become an obedient boy. Immediately agreeing with her boss, Zhou would erase the fact that Chin would have made any mistakes if she took on a new case. Shu recalled the billionaire whom no one could persuade, but Chin managed to break him in 2 minutes, and he simply asked for orders. The secretary, along with other employees, recalling the number of men who fell at Chin's feet, even wanted to learn this skill from her. When she entered the new president's office, Chin deliberately wanted to leave the door open, ordering the girls to stay put and watch the newcomer being tamed. The delighted Zhou wanted to see the boss kneel down while putting the shoes on the girl's feet, and she desperately wanted to see such a scene again, something her colleagues also longed for. Thinking about the employees' words about forcing the CEO to kneel down to put her shoes on, Chin knew that they too would understand the role of the boss walking on his feet in front of her. In Lady Hongyan's understanding, in this case, her position in the corporation would become even more unshakable. Introducing herself as Vice President Qin Hongyan, the girl, although she saw the head of the company from behind, assessed his profile and jawline like those of a Korean idol. Looking at the new boss, Chin found him vaguely familiar, and she repeated her secretary's request to visit the boss's office. President Ye seemed not to hear anything, continuing to study the important documents on his desk. Seeing the director turn towards Chin, the employees were sure that his nose would bleed violently due to the lady's beauty, and he would fall to his knees before this queen. Qin Hongyan looked at the man with a surprised look, recognizing him as Ye Chen, whom she had recently met at old lady Wang's birthday party. Qin Hongyan herself fell to her knees in surprise, having just expected this from her CEO a minute ago. Zhou Rongrong, along with the other girls, did not understand their boss's behavior and looked at her from behind the door in surprise. The dark-haired secretary looked at the door of the CEO's office, which was now open. Without taking her eyes off what was happening, the puzzled Zhou could not figure out why it was not the president who knelt before Qin, but the other way around. At this moment, the head of the Huasheng Corporation, Ye Chen, was coldly looking at the girls outside the door. Finally realizing that they had been noticed, the company employees immediately retreated back, trying to hide from sight as far as possible. As if she had been drained by the shower, Qin Hongyan continued to sit on the floor, unable to say a single word. Ye Chen, not understanding the girls' fall at his feet when they met, did not deserve such a meeting. Qin mentally asked him to help her get up, thinking about her shame. Because of the cursed family, Wang Xin would not have insulted the new boss like that, so the girl apologized for what she said yesterday, admitting her mistake. Kneeling down in front of Qin, the company's CEO seemed to also recall yesterday's events and the comment about them being lovers. Embracing the lady, Ye Chen admired the scent and charms of her body, not surprised by Fan Chao's love for the lady, reminding her of his alleged rental of the island for a marriage proposal in front of Qin Hongyan. Feeling deeply ashamed, Qin asked the young boss for forgiveness again, blushing slightly. After listening to his deputy, Ye Chen asked her to finally get up on her feet, but the lady could not take her eyes off the man. Qin immediately ran to close the blinds at the CEO's request to avoid any cause for gossip. Recalling the events of yesterday, Ye Chen repeated the girl's words about the guy's place in the trash heap, but today he was the head of Huashan and her boss. Sitting down at his workplace, the guy good-naturedly asked what methods the girl was now going to use to cut off his oxygen supply. Qin couldn't even imagine that someone like him would become a hanger-on in the Wang family, but admitting her guilt, she was ready to bear any punishment. If the boss slapped her, Chin would endure it, listen to his scolding, and if he fired her, she would pack her things and never show her face again. Listening to Chin, Yekin understood how difficult she was. She didn't panic in trouble, didn't admit guilt, and didn't prevaricate. To reassure the lady, the CEO announced that he had no intention of firing her. Yesterday, Chin Hongyan was the only one who gave the guy a chance, and if he were an ordinary poor man, the lady would have become his savior. Looking warmly at her boss, the girl thanked him, promising to serve him faithfully from now on. In a more stern tone, Ye Chen promised to forgive the girl, but he had no intention of sparing those who had tried to destroy him yesterday. After asking the man to simply call her Hongyan, the girl was instructed to prepare a dossier on everyone who spoke out against Ye Chen yesterday. Agreeing to the assignment, the girl predicted a quick upheaval in the business world of Yunzhou in connection with President Ye Chen's hunt. Half an hour later, the CEO's deputy placed a folder with dossiers on all the offenders, including Fan Chao, on his desk. Recalling Jiao's words about how it was impossible to compare with Fang Chao because of his billions, the boy mentioned this first-class clan with huge assets to Qin. In reality, things were not so rosy, and Qin knew about the decline in the assets of the Fan family, which owned 3 billion, slightly more than the Wang family. Speaking about the Wang's project and their request for 70 million, Qin was ready to return their bribes and offer to forget about Huasheng, mentally amazed at Jia Yao, who would soon learn the truth. For Ye Chen, these were different things, and he didn't want to mix personal and business matters, so he asked to see the Wang family's project plan. Just as Qin was about to bring the document, the CEO asked her to wait because of his personal desire to go with her. Meanwhile, Fang Chao, who had arrived in the lobby of the Huaxing Corporation office, was mentally hoping for this Ye Chen to land as Vice President Qin. Hearing the surprised cry of the company employee who saw him, the man looked in her direction but did not recognize her. Upset by the guy's inattention, the girl reminded him of the meeting at the bar where Chao treated her and then, together with his friends, had fun with a lady. Suspecting that he was quite drunk that evening if he had picked up a woman who was far from beautiful, Chao assured that he remembered everything, asking the girl where she worked. Realizing the value of his new acquaintance, the villain kindly asked to be taken upstairs because of the impending danger to Vice President Qin. A minute later, approaching the door of the company's head's office, Chao saw 3 girls discussing a certain lady who had fallen to her knees right on the threshold. After apologizing, the guest wanted to know Lady Qin's whereabouts, and upon learning of her presence, heard Zhou's question about setting up a meeting. Ignoring the secretary's cries, the man resolutely rushed forward, wanting to see Vice President Hongyan. Opening the door to the office where the girl was supposed to be, Chao Fan directed his keen gaze forward. Chao looked at Ye Chen, who was present here, with a brazen grin, calling him a thief and an abandoned woman, while Qin looked at the newcomer with surprise. While the girl was angrily perplexed by the uninvited guest, Chao himself accused Ye Chen of trying to hide in the office to take revenge on Vice President Qin. Passing by the girl, Chao, calling her Sister Hongyan, asked her not to be afraid of anything, promising to immediately throw out the trash, meaning Ye Chen. Unexpectedly for himself, the impudent man received a juicy slap in the face from Qin Hongyan, who was not going to tolerate such insults directed at her boss. The girl started screaming, saying that she was not his little sister, and demanded that he call her only Vice President Qin. Chao Fang, who was nervous and kept calling the girl sis and Vice President, didn't understand why Qin Hongyan and her staff didn't do anything when they saw Ye Chen. Chen looked with some regret at his opponent, who no longer suspected him of wanting revenge, but of wanting to get a job as a security guard in the company. Remembering the gossip's words about knees, Fan thought of Qin Ye Chen, who was lying in front of him, begging for forgiveness and a job as a security guard, having refused her offer back at the banquet. In the villain's mind early this morning, Chen dressed up as a human, wearing a suit, and came to the girl, wanting to become her watchdog. Xian couldn't agree to this, in Fang Chao's understanding, since yesterday she had promised to cut off Ye Chen's oxygen supply. Zhou, who witnessed this heated conversation, couldn't believe the vice president's sincere desire to destroy the company's head. Outraged by Fang Chao's accusations, the girl slapped him in the face again, denying her desire to eliminate the current CEO. Qin ordered Rongrong to kick Chao out so that he would no longer be in their corporation, immediately firing the employee who had let him into the office. The guys in suits approached and asked the gentleman to leave, and Chao was mentally indignant at how he, the heir of the Fang family, was hit in the face twice in front of a poor hanger-on. Cho, held back by the guards, shouted at Ye Chen not to hope for peace while being near Qin Hongyan, promising to get him anyway, because soon the guy would have nothing to eat and sleep and would end up in the trash. While rudely insulting Chin, but on the street, linking her career success with bed, Chow planned to tame Ye Chen and make the girl crawl in front of him while still having fun with her. With his cheeks red from the blows, Finn drove his car, thinking about the loser Ye Chen, who became Shin Hongyan's bodyguard, urgently preparing to report this to the Wang family. An hour later, at the villa, Sushan Chow was telling the old woman Wang, who did not believe in the work of her abandoned husband Ye Chen as a bodyguard, about his submission of documents to Chin in her office. The elderly woman's relatives couldn't believe what they were hearing, loudly expressing their amazement, but Jiao, who was the most shocked of all, simply remained silent. Chow also heard from the Huasheng Company staff about Ye Chen's instant collapse in front of Chin Hongyan as soon as he saw her, begging for forgiveness. Wang Jiao listened attentively to her gentleman, who in his speech admitted that Chin had sympathy for Chen, which is why the businesswoman took the guy in. An angry girl, indignant at her ex-husband, outraged at how he dared to kneel in front of another woman. Jiao had given Ye Chen a chance so many times, and if he had fallen at her feet, she would have forgiven him without filing for divorce or calling the police. But her husband would not bend his knees, and now he was crawling before another woman. With a smile on her face, Wen Yuan turned to her sister and pointed out her lack of charm to keep her own husband. If Ye Chen were the husband of the now mocking Yuan, she would have forced him to kneel from the first day, and he would have washed his wife's feet without getting up from his knees. For the past 3 years, Wang Jiao had been too kind to her husband, but if she had another chance, she would make him kneel from morning until night. For Jiao Qin, Hongyan was a woman who had broken her word, so Lady Wang proposed to sever all relations with her and punish her. Slapping her granddaughter on the cheek for such words, Old Lady Wang reminded her of the 70 million investments in Qin's hands, so it was impossible to be hostile to her. Zhu Qiao knew about the girl's jealousy towards Vice President Qin and suggested that she resign herself to it, since she really did have more acumen. Jiao's resolute intention to go to Huasheng to deal with the offenders, since her family was unwilling to help her, angered Old Lady Wang, who ordered her granddaughter to stop. Turning to her son, the woman asked him to call Qin Hongyan, wanting to speak with the corporation's vice president personally. During the conversation, Mrs. Wang, passing on rumors about her former son-in-law's employment as a bodyguard, told how she herself would have given him to Qin, knowing of her sympathy for him. Recalling Qin's promise yesterday to support the Wang family and to try to cut off Ye Chen's oxygen supply, the old woman asked him to explain his breaking of his word. Qin wanted to apologize for not being able to keep her word, even though everything was not as Madame Wang said. But if she had found out about the parasite's presidency, she would have struck. Sweetly calling each other their own people, Wang didn't mind if Qin took the guy as a gift, since he was a good-for-nothing son-in-law, despite Jiao's attempts to object. Regarding Ye Chen, the old woman did not hold a grudge against Qin, but expressed hope that she would be able to keep her word regarding the 70 million in funding. Jin had already spoken about the project with President Ye, who was interested in him. The boss liked the idea itself, but he wanted to know the details. The old woman reacted with a hint of surprise to President Ye's positive assessment of the plan and promised to send Zhiqiang to Huasheng to discuss the project face-to-face. Mrs. Wang demanded that her son, who had overheard the entire conversation, show his best side to the head of the corporation, and he promised to delight President Ye. Due to Ye Chen's cooperation with Qin Hongyan, Zhiqiang suggested to his mother that they drop the watch theft case. Having ordered the investigation to continue, the old woman demanded that they find what was stolen, and it didn't matter whether they imprisoned Ye Chen or did Qin a favor by forgiving him, it would all be to the family's advantage. Xiao Jai, who immediately intervened in the conversation, told the grandmother about Ye Chen selling an expensive watch to a local bandit. Having demanded that they look for evidence, Old Lady Wang called her former son-in-law Qin Hongyan's dog, and even if they took revenge on him, the vice president clearly wouldn't stand up for the guy. After praising Zhiqiang for extracting the contract and Xiao Jai for finding the evidence, the old woman looked displeasedly at Jia Yao and her parents, calling her father good for nothing and considering her granddaughter stupid. Jia Yao only listened with disappointment to her grandmother, who criticized her for her inability to keep her stupid husband, and it would have been better if Yuan had the beautiful face and debauchery. After these words, the girl instantly turned around and ran away, much to the amazement of her own mother. During the journey, the girl insulted Ye Chen, because of whom she was so deeply disgraced in front of her family and now sought to destroy him. A short time later, Wang Jiayao arrived at the underground parking lot of Huaxin Corporation, where other cars were already parked. The girl saw Ye Chen and the company's vice president, Qin Hongyan, heading somewhere together. Her ex-husband, who was so hateful to the lady, dressed up like some kind of dandy after the divorce. After getting out of the car, Jiayao began to insult Ye Chen, considering him to be Qin Hongyan's obedient dog. Turning around, the guy noticed his ex-wife, and his companion did not understand the purpose of the arrogant Princess Jiayao's presence here. When Jiayao told Ye Chen how he crawled around Qin Hongyan begging for forgiveness, she didn't understand why he didn't do the same in front of his wife if he was willing to humiliate himself. His ex-wife reminded him of the previous chances she had given him. All he had to do was fall at her feet and beg for forgiveness, and he would still be the Wang family's son-in-law. Ye Chen was amazed at the girl's audacity to ask why he didn't kneel down, considering it all too much. The day before yesterday, Jiayao was relaxing in a hotel with this fan, cheating on her husband, and now she wanted to see her ex-husband crawling on his knees. Reminding him of the chance he had been given at the banquet yesterday, the lady was sure they would have remained married if Chen had knelt down, and then they would have been able to persuade the grandmother to be merciful. Recalling the Four Seasons Hotel, where she would not have called the police if her husband had fallen at her feet, Jiayao spoke of humiliation, not understanding his choice of Qin, since she was his wife and kneeling before her was not shameful. Ye Chen is not ashamed to fall on his knees before his wife, but not before a prostitute. After all, he has spoiled her too well over the past 3 years. Disagreeing with this, Jiayao insisted that she had let him down herself and was wrong to be so kind to her husband, because the family accused her of raising Ye Chen poorly. Earlier, she would have forced him to crawl on his knees. Ye Chen was forced to silently listen to this angry tirade from his now ex-wife, directed at his good name. Suddenly, Jiayao, who continued to speak in a raised voice, received a strong blow to her left cheek. Qin, who did this, shamed Jiayao, accusing her of cuckolding her husband, when the lady not only did not repent, but even dared to open her mouth. Jiayao, who had burst into tears from the blow, covered her cheek with her hand from Qin, who was ready to continue hitting her without asking permission. Having calmed down, Lady Wang looked bitterly at Vice President Huaxing, who not only took her husband away, but was now also beating her. Putting his hand on his deputy's shoulder, Ye Chen asked her to forget about everything and not to quarrel. The new president of the corporation then turned to Jiayao and called for her to leave, as he was no longer her man. Jiayao wouldn't even throw away the family dog, so she told Ye Chen to quit Huaxin and leave Qin, and if she paid 200,000 a year, then the ex-wife was ready to give 500,000. Ye Chen started coughing, and Qin Hongyan laughed at her rival's attempt to lure the young man for 500,000. Continuing to laugh, the vice president considered the girl too naive in connection with her strange desire. Even if she added 0 to the sum, it still would not be enough. Watching the Jiayao couple leave, she doubted that bodyguards were paid 200,000. And if it was 5 million, then Qin had clearly gone crazy. But she called Chen again. Grabbing the guy by the hand, the girl demanded that he definitely return today, since Xiaojai had managed to find evidence of the sale of the watch, which meant the police would put Chen in jail. If the guy had listened to his ex-wife, left Qin Hongyan, and became Jiayao's personal bodyguard, she would have asked Xiao to spare him. Turning his back to the girl, the man thanked her for her generosity, but refused to be her bodyguard. Ye Chen wasn't hired to guard his ex-wife's peace, while she jumped on other people's beds in hotel rooms. Taking the driver's seat of the luxury car, Ye Chen suggested to Wang Jiayao that they file a lawsuit if Xiaojai had evidence. Jiayao almost ran after the car as it started moving, demanding that Ye Chen stop, but nothing came of it. Qin was clearly not paying Ye Chen 5 million for security, as Jiayao thought. He was clearly getting half-time pay for playing the role of lover, being outraged by the presence of the president's boyfriend, picking up stray dogs. She had a negative attitude towards Jiayao's ex-husband for his thinking that Qin had a man, but Chen himself wanted to become her lover. The girl did not understand how she was worse than Hongyan. Yunzhou 7th Street, known for its slums and also as the most crime-ridden area, was home to the poor and criminals. Every bandit in the city knew the saying that order or chaos in Yunzhou was decided by a brother or a watermelon, and if the watermelon is carrying a bag, it's either a head or a knife. Seeing Xiaojai greeting him and calling the owner Brother Watermelon, the latter, a man with tattoos and a cigarette in his hands, greeted Mr. Wang, apologizing for not having met him. After visiting the watermelon's brother, Xiaojai offered to make a deal with him, showing him a box containing a Richard Mille watch worth more than 5 million. Having opened the lid, the young man showed the owner of the house a luxury watch, which he was ready to part with at a discounted price of $4.5 million. Xiaojai asked his old acquaintance not to tell anyone after purchasing a luxury watch from him, naming a certain Ye Chen as the seller. Brother Watermelon, who was looking at his comrade, noticed the bruises under Xiao's eyes and called them the work of that same Ye Chen. Agreeing with the insight of the Watermelon brother, Xiao called Chen his uncle's hanger-on. And although the family did not want a scandal, Jai had to send his son-in-law to jail. Watermelon didn't want to help Xiao, remembering Mr. Lu's commandment about not getting involved in other people's family squabbles when you might end up on the receiving end after helping. Promising not to allow this to happen, Xiao spoke about expelling Ye Chen from the family, not understanding why Watermelon would listen to what kind of Lu was there. When the owner of the house, demanding that the guest shut his mouth, called Mr. Lu the boss of their gang, Xiao was ready to sink into the ground. Having called Mr. Lu his mentor, without whom even Arbus himself would not exist, and for him the boss's word was law, the guy advised Xiao to find someone else. Trying to achieve his goal, Xiaojai offered to buy his brother Arbus an elite watch for $4 million. Getting up from the sofa, the owner of the house, with an unpleasant mockery, once again reminded him of the strong spiritual connection with Mr. Lu, whom he could not disobey. Xiaojai, who never backed down from his promise, named a sum of $3 million, from which his brother could earn $2 million net at once. Reminding Mr. Lu of the rule of not wasting money in their business, Brother Watermelon spoke of the great heaven and earth, but finances, which are above all, decided to take on the guest business. During the journey, Ye Chen ordered Qin Hongyan not to touch Wang Jiao again without his personal orders. Taking her boss's words as pity for his ex-wife, the vice president reminded him of Jiao's nasty deeds, and he did not hate her. In the guy's understanding, hatred was just the reverse side of love. If Jiao experienced this feeling, then she loved. So what difference does it make? After these words, Ye Chen seemed to Qin like the heir of a great clan, whose outlook and thoughts were impossible to estimate. The guy seemed handsome and rich to the girl. He had such deep thinking, and he treated women tenderly and generously. If Wang Jiao couldn't appreciate this young man, then Huasheng Corporation Vice President Qin Hongyan would take him for herself. After visiting Jing Temple, the executives of a large company discussed the Wang family's plans to build a first-class mansion there. Chen, under the first-class mansion, perceived a project for which the Wang family sought investment from Huashen, ultimately requiring the construction of elite residences for the best cones. For Chen, it was an ideal place with beautiful gardens and a forest of red maples, where one could have picnics among the trees and near natural hot springs. During the walk, the lady expressed confusion about the boss's desire to invest money in a good place after the Wang family had treated him cruelly. When Ye Chen called it all his personal idea, Qin suspected the Wang family of stealing their boss's idea. The boy saw the Wang family's obsession with breaking into the Yunju elite. But after the death of Jiao's grandfather, Zhiqiang and Zhi Yuan were incapable of anything, only squabbling over the inheritance. In light of this situation, Ye Chen came up with a plan to allow them to enter high society without strengthening the clan's power by building an elite residential complex. After receiving the proposal from her husband, Jia Yao told everything to old lady Wang, who accepted, giving the project to her son, Zhiqiang. Qin knew about the Wang family's favor towards Zhiqiang's branch, explaining it by the patriarchal system that did not want to let Jia Yao into business, and here Hongyan sympathized with her. Recalling how the Wang family had treated Jia Yao, Ye Chen remembered the pressure her family had put on her, and then how she had been forced to marry Ye Chen. Even if this was true in Qin Hongyan's understanding, it was impossible to justify cheating on one's other half. Playing with a maple leaf and then placing it on his companion's head, Ye Chen suddenly invited her to drink with him. People were strolling along the long street of bars, and a female voice was telling another about her desire to forget. Seated at the bar with cocktails and snacks, Wang Jiao asked a girl named Hong Ye to join her. Surprised by Jia Yao's desire to drink in broad daylight, Song Hong Ye asked him to tell her about the grievance and promised to deal with the scoundrels. When talking about Qin, who had slapped her, the indignant lady said how she had simply scolded her worthless husband without laying a finger on her rival, and that she, by some right, had beaten the unfortunate woman. Unable to contain her emotions, the girl burst into tears, not understanding who this Qin was to Ye Chen's hanger-on. Reminding her of the saying that when you beat a dog, you should look at its owner, Hong Ye called her friend's ex-husband a dog for Qin, and she would not tolerate insults directed at him. Enjoying the taste of the drink, Jiao didn't see a problem in her betrayal of her husband because it happened only once. Today, almost all beauties do similar things. Song Hongyi couldn't drink her cocktail when her friend reminded her of her two previous affairs. Indignant at being involved in someone else's business, Hongyi mentioned how her husband had never caught her in the act. But Jiao again spoke of a hanger-on who could tolerate it. After telling her friend how she ordered her husband to kneel, Jiao couldn't understand how he ran to Qin to crawl before her and become her bodyguard, even though his wife could also pay him. Thanks to the information she had about Ye Chen, Song Hongye knew how he had fallen in love with his wife so deeply in 3 years that he couldn't stop loving her. Jiao was surprised by her friend's words about her husband's refusal and her going to Qin, where he became a bodyguard, thereby trying to force her to respect him. With his wife's money, the guy would always feel like a gigolo, but once he started earning money himself, he was able to straighten his back. Chen wanted to become successful and then marry Jiao again. Wang Jiao, after listening to her friend, seemed to have a new insight and completely agreed with everything Song Hongye said. Smiling contentedly, the girl thought that her ex-husband, who was considered a loser, was still in love with her. When her friend proposed to marry Fan Chao, Jiao responded with reluctance because Chao was flighty and did not know how to care as much as Chen. Song pointed out the possibility of getting a divorce and getting Chen back. Calling Hongye a villain in a not very serious tone, Wang Jiao again thought of Ye Chen, who had upset her so it served him right. Reminded of Ye Chen's tenure as a domestic worker throughout their family life, his friend couldn't understand his work as a courier for the past 6 months. A sleepy Jiao told how, when the family was on a trip to Switzerland, Chen fell ill and began working himself to earn money for medicine. But suddenly her phone rang. When she picked up the phone, the girl heard an offer to immediately come to her grandmother in connection with the discovery of evidence of Ye Chen selling her grandfather's expensive watch. When Ye Chen arrived at the Huasheng Corporation office the next day, all the employees nearby politely greeted the new CEO. Hearing the ringtone on his smartphone, Ye Chen picked up the device and was surprised to see that it was Wang Xiaoji calling him. The former relative asked the guy to immediately go to Grandma Wang's house, since Xiao had found evidence of Chen selling the watch. Ye Chen refused because he was busy, but Xiao talked about inviting the man who bought the watch from the guy, urging his former son-in-law to be brave and meet him. Surprised by Xiao's ability to find a false witness, Ye Chen decided to come to Grandma Wang, although he did not sell the watch, but to finally resolve the issue. After hanging up the phone, General Manager Huasheng saw Secretary Zhou Rongrong and learned of her driving ability. The employee immediately agreed when the boss asked her to take him to Xishan Villa. The black luxury car carrying Ye Chen drove quickly along the road towards the country mansion. Ye Chen, looking at the scenery flashing outside the window, had mixed feelings about returning to the villa as President Huasheng. 30 minutes later, the car carrying Ye Chen and Secretary Zhou entered the Xishan Villa, where a meeting with his former relatives awaited the young man. The first to leave the salon was Zhou, who attracted the attention of everyone present with her attractiveness. Knowing her as Qin Hongyan's right-hand woman, Su Lan was confused by the presence of the secretary driving the car, just like Grandma Wang, who was waiting for Ye Chen. Having opened the car door, the secretary informed the corporation's CEO of her arrival at the location. After going outside, Ye Chen asked his subordinate to wait for him here until all the matters were settled, and the girl obediently bowed her head in agreement. Having witnessed this scene, the old woman Wang and her daughter were amazed by Zhou Rongrong's work as a driver for their former son-in-law. The guy's ex-wife was no less surprised, not understanding how this was possible. Xiao Jai stepped forward and laughed, thinking that Ye Chen was a poser who thought he was a poor courier who was wiping the noses of rich people. Grandma agreed with Xiao Jai, as did Su Lan, who found the boy's behavior laughably provocative. Continuing to mock the guest, Xiao criticized him for the boss's appearance in the presence of a secretary, whom he allegedly hired to drive the car and open the doors. Looking at Yuan Yuan, who called him a watchdog in Huasheng under President Qin, Ye Chen saw the character flaws of the Wang siblings that only the grave could correct. Finally turning his gaze to Jia Yao's ex-wife, the young man was surprised to see a smile on her face. Acknowledging Song Hongyi's rightness regarding her husband's move to Huasheng for the sake of success and to prove his love for his wife, Jia Yao considered his issue today to be the best confirmation of this. All these people had sawdust instead of brains, so Ye Chen immediately set about the witness and Xiao Jai asked to follow him. The boys were heading towards the end point of the route through the large territory of a country villa, and it seemed as if nothing foreshadowed trouble. Opening the door of the room where Ye Chen was brought by his former relative, CEO Huasheng saw the villains with bats in their hands. Yehan, who was confused about the bandit's appearance at the villa, was looked at by Brother Watermelon's men, who greeted him at the new meeting. The guy's question about their previous meeting made Arbus want to remind him how he himself had come to sell a watch a couple of days ago, and the buyer had paid 5 million for it. Since every schoolchild in Yunzhou knew Brother Watermelon, Xiao was surprised by Ye Chen's ignorance, accusing him of being afraid to admit selling the watch, which is why he pretended. Looking back at Xiao Jai, Ye Chen responded with irony to the appearance of such a witness, which was in keeping with the spirit of a relative, but the latter began to accuse the guy of theft again. Grandma Wang, who had come up to her, was amazed at Ye Chen's persistence in denying the fact of stealing the watch when he dared to rob the family. When the young man addressed the elder Madame Wang, he told her about his visit only to explain that he had not taken her watch. Taking the watch box in her hands, the old woman demanded an explanation of how the watch ended up in Brother Arbus's hands, since it was a limited edition, with each watch having an exclusive number. Watermelon began to prove to Ye Chen that it was he who sold him the watch, boasting that he had used the proceeds to rent the presidential suite at the Four Seasons. When inquiring about the source of Ye Chen's hotel money, if he hadn't received 5 million, Arbuz, who had rehearsed this speech, believed that the enemy wouldn't be able to get away with it. Wanting to communicate like an ordinary person, Ye Chen received only ridicule and coldness in response, so he revealed his cards by introducing himself as President Huasheng. When Ye Chen also called himself a billionaire, hoping for the strength of this explanation, everyone around him fell silent, looking at the guest. The next moment, everyone started laughing in unison, except for Grandma Wang, whose face had a strange expression on it. Xiao laughed at Ye Chen as if he thought he was Wang Doyu, even copying lines from a comedy film, but the guest himself knew nothing about it. Laughing out loud at the guy's enthusiasm for pretending to be rich, Yuan, following her sister, was ready to marry him, promising to serve Chen in turn. After asking Ye Chen not to play the fool, Watermelon suggested that he kneel down and bow to the old lady and young Wao, without fear of jail, since the old lady promised not to put him in jail. Recalling their 3 years of marriage, Jiao pointed to her family's ability to remember old feelings, which is why they would not have sent him to prison. Although her ex-husband spent several $100,000, Jiao later offered to work it off for him, but for now he needed to get down on his knees and apologize. Ye Chen has done nothing wrong to anyone and will not kneel down, and even if he were to make a mistake, no one from the Wang clan is worthy of seeing him humiliated. Following the old woman who had rudely insulted the guy, Wang Sulan demanded that the police be called and the worthless parasite be locked up for 10 years. If it had reached the police, the whole adventure that Xiao Jai had started would have collapsed, something that he and Arbuz did not want to face. The villains wanted to see Ye Chen kneeling before the old woman, and then they could hush up the matter. Watermelon was ready to force the guy to do this by giving such an order to his henchmen. The bandit who took the boy by one hand told him about Brother Watermelon's order, while the other one directly demanded that Ye Chen kneel down. Forced to repeat his words again, Ye Chen spoke of the unworthiness of the Wang family to see such a thing with his participation. While one of the bandits hesitated, Ye Chen knocked out his accomplice with a powerful blow as he tried to force the guy to bow. Then the first attacker was quickly thrown off balance by the guy, falling to the ground. Ye Chen was no slouch, something Xiao Jai noticed and demanded that all the bandits attack the lone guy together. Suddenly, a white dog, which was often seen near Old Woman Wang, appeared in front of the villains, barking loudly. The dog, jumping in front of Ye Chen as if to protect him from the bandits, barked furiously at his attackers. Having tenderly picked up the dog that had been barking at him just yesterday, Ye Chen knew Hua Hua as his grandmother's beloved dog, the one he had cleaned up after all these years. But in a moment of danger, the little animal stood up for the boy. Holding a pet that remembered kindness in her arms, for Ye Chen the dog was much better than people, who were worse than pigs. After receiving orders from her grandmother to return Hua Hua to her, Yuan resolutely walked up to Ye Chen and took the dog away. The woman once again gave EXT the opportunity to take advantage of his last chance, to kneel and repent so that the foolishness would not be beaten out of him. Surrounded by the criminals, Ye Chen also repeated his words about the unworthiness of all these people to see such a thing. The next moment, without a new command, the bandits again attacked the young man, trying to maim him. 4 years ago, a year after Ye Chen became a hanger-on in the Wang family, his family sent the boy to Syria for combat training, thanks to which he was now taking out enemies. Compared to the commoners, these guys, against whom the valiant Ye Chen was now fighting, could pass for professionals. But for someone who had spent a year diligently fighting on the battlefield amidst blood and corpses, these current opponents of the guy were just kids. It seemed like all the opponents had been defeated, But behind Ye Chen, there was another villain preparing to attack him. Without wasting any time, the criminal pounced on the young man, grabbing him by the chest and preventing him from moving. A bandit in a sleeveless jacket approached Ye Chen, demanding that his companion hold the prisoner so that he could stab him. Brother Arbuz, who was standing behind him, bowed his head down, mentally wanting to destroy the guy for beating up the bandit's charges. To everyone's surprise, as everyone was already celebrating their victory in their thoughts, Yachin hit the attacker who had grabbed him with his head and hands. Throwing the criminal aside, Ye Chen, his eyes burning with indignation and thirst for revenge, began to crush his enemies. Watching the fight from the sidelines, a frightened Yuan couldn't believe that one person could be so frighteningly strong. Old Lady Wang remembered her late husband, who must have known how skilled Ye Chen was in fighting if he had insisted on marrying him and Jiao. Allowing her grandfather to demand marriage with Ye Chen because of his desire to protect his granddaughter, Jia Yao lived in a peaceful time without enemies. Her grandmother connected everything with money. Laughingly telling Ji Yuan about the treasure, referring to Ye Chen, who was given to the family by his father, Ji Chang was happy about his refusal. If Zhi Yuan assumed that his father wanted to bring Jiao and Ye Chen together from the very beginning, then that was not the case. The old man had come to Ji Chang first. Talking about a promising son-in-law, the father offered Ji Chang to marry Yuan to him, but upon learning about the villager Ye Chen, the man refused, dumping him on Jiao. Xiaojai reacted with irony when he learned about how Jiao married a man who turned out to be useless to her sister, and Yuan laughed at her grandfather because she had no need for a savage who waved his hand. Rejoicing at her youth at the time, which allowed her to avoid this fate, Yuan laughingly asked her sister to enjoy such happiness herself. Yeshin, who continued to fight the criminals, could not even imagine that everything was exactly as they said. Returning from battle training 3 years ago, and having seen his fill of blood and death, Yechin desperately longed for love and the comfort of home. The young man fell in love with Wang Jiao at first sight, dreaming of spending his whole life with the sweet and beautiful girl. Standing amid the dead bandits lying on the floor, Yechen reflected on how things had ultimately turned out exactly this way. Brother Watermelon screamed in fear when Yechen suddenly grabbed his hand, not understanding the boy's actions. Watermelon, experiencing incredibly severe pain from the iron grip, screamed, unable to fight off the enemy's attack. In a cold tone, Yechen demanded that the bandit immediately explain the reason for accusing the young man of stealing the watch, and name those who gave such an order. Living by the concept of Watermelon, he was not afraid of death, and Yechen could kill him if he had the guts, but in that case he would bitterly regret it. Xiao, who demanded that Yechen stop, did not want to see the murder in his grandmother's house, but he was mentally afraid of the consequences if his son-in-law beat the truth out of his bandit. After repeating that he had not stolen anything, Yechen suggested that the family go to the police if they had evidence, demanding that they stop telling him about their unwillingness to turn him in for his own good. Having fought off a group of bandits and told his family everything, the young man headed towards the exit of the villa room. Unexpectedly, Hua Hua the dog appeared on his path again, pitifully asking to be picked up by the man who had previously looked after her. Ignoring Xiaojai's cries, Yechen wanted to take only her from the whole family, asking the dog to stop its whims in view of his final absence. Watching Yechen leave, Xiao asked his father if they would just let him leave. Zhuqiang pointed out that it was impossible to deal with the opponent now, suggesting they approach from a different angle. Inquiring about the condition of Arbuz's brother, who was leaving with his charges, Xiao thought about hushing up the matter, since today he and his family had seriously set this guy up. Having yelled at Xiao for having to fight the scumbag Yechen, Watermelon demanded $1 million for the treatment of his people, and Ji asked him to teach the enemy a lesson, or better yet, kill him. Sitting down in the car seat, Arbuz promised his friend he'd get even with this Yechen, and then said goodbye. Xiaojai escorted the car with the bandits out of the gate, and Watermelon was indignant at the public humiliation of Yechegum, who almost broke his arm, deciding not to leave it like that. During the meeting, Yechen announced the start of cooperation with Dingchen Company, asking Hong Yan to request the Wang family to send a representative to discuss the project. After hearing the new CEO's instructions, Qin Hongyan immediately prepared to inform them of the proposal. At this time at the Shishan Villa, the representatives of the Wang family continued to discuss their affairs. Ji Qian told his mother that Huashen's boss had agreed to invest 70 million, but he needed to come and discuss everything in person. The boss wanted to assess the partner's preparation. After listening to his mother's demand that he give his all and impress the president, since they had worked with Huasheng many times, Chang promised to rise to the occasion. Feeling a touch on his shoulder, Ji Chang shuddered and looked back to see Yuan Yuan, who wanted to go with her father. Jixing was surprised to hear his daughter's wish, as she had heard that President Hua Sheng was a young and attractive man, unlike the old bosses. The girl looked back and saw Sister Jiao, reminding her that the president was busy. No matter how handsome he was having an affair with Qin Hongyan. Since they were just dating and not married, and Yuan is younger than Qin, she has a better figure, so she can take away the head of the corporation. Xiaojia expressed his full support for his sister, and old lady Wang agreed with her thoughts, and the rare outstanding men that were now available had to be fought off if one wanted to get them. Hearing her grandmother's instructions to go to meet President Hua Sheng with her father, Yuan Yuan cried out in joy and thanked her grandmother. The upset Jiao also wanted to go, since it was she who proposed the first-class mansion project, but her grandmother gave it to her eldest uncle's family. Calling her sister a divorcee, Yuan Yuan advised her not to count on the attention of the company president, who would certainly not covet a used product. Agreeing with her granddaughter, the grandmother acknowledged Jiao's more striking beauty, but wanted to bring the president together with Yuan, suggesting that she hold on to Chao first, and Yuan guaranteed love with him. Forced to listen to her relatives, Jiao observed the same thing every time, noticing her grandmother's bias. An hour later, Secretary Zhou opened the door to the office of the Huasheng Corporation president and announced the arrival of Wang Zhicheng and his daughter. While working on the paperwork, the young man asked the employee to convey to the partners a request to wait in the reception area. Without looking up at Zhou Rongrong, the man ordered that no tea be served to the guests under any circumstances. While waiting for the reception, Yuan Yuan was indignant at her father's decision to force her to wear a dress that was completely closed except for a slit at the thigh. According to Ji Qiang, if the girl had come to the first meeting wearing something revealing, the president would have called her cheap. But Yuan's goal was to become the legal wife of the company's head and look great. The daughter thanked her father for the lesson, promising to take the director away from Qin Hongyan, who mentally counted on becoming the head of the clan if his daughter charmed President Ye. The companions, who continued to wait, did not receive tea even after 10 minutes and were indignant among themselves about Huashen's attitude towards guests. Opening the door to the secretary's office, Yuan asked the employee to bring them 2 cups of tea. The girl herself wanted black tea, and Zhou with a smile asked her to wait. 10 minutes later, Yuan Yuan was openly angry, ranting at the top of her voice because the secretary still hadn't brought them anything. The father, sitting in the chair, asked his daughter to calm down. When she marries the president, she will be able to fire the secretary, but for now he asked her to wait for the head of the company. After hearing her parents' fair remark, Yuan Yuan actually and instantly came to her senses and smiled. Half an hour later, the girl complained of being unable to sit in the pose of a noble maiden any longer, and the president was still missing. In the saddened Ji Cheng's opinion, the president did not take the guests seriously if he forced them to stay in the reception room for an entire hour. Suddenly, the president of the Huasheng Corporation appeared behind the half-open doors, wearing a stylish and expensive suit. Yu Chen was aware of little sister Yuan Yuan's free behavior at home, but he was surprised by how she behaved in public, regretting that her father had not taught her manners. In all 3 years, Ye Chen saw the girl in a kapao for the first time and didn't even think to see a drop of feminine grace in the seriously surprised lady. Yuan didn't wear this outfit for Ye Chen's sake. It turned out to be unworthy not only of Jiao, so the guy was definitely far from her sister, but in the young man's understanding, she misunderstood everything. Still treating Ye Chen as a security guard in the company, Zhu Qiang asked the young man where the CEO was. Noticing that the guest still had no idea that Ye was the director, Chen offered to tell him the details of the first-class mansion project. Calling the guy a pathetic bodyguard and a piece of meat who could only wave his arms, Zhi Cheng mockingly doubted the young man's ability to understand business. Taking this behavior of the people as an unwillingness to talk, Ye Chen decided to go back to the office. Quickly approaching Ye Chen and grabbing his shoulder, Yuan Yuan asked him to slow down as she intended to question him. Since the guy had been with Qin Hongyan as a bodyguard for 3 days, Yuan understood that he knew about her connection with President Ye. It could be said that the young man really knew something, and these words gave Yuan Yuan hope. The girl really wanted to know how close the relationship was between the company president and Qin, and where exactly they spent the night, at his place or hers. Knowing Yuan as a gossip who spread rumors at the speed of light, Ye Chen wanted to take advantage of this to stop the rumors about himself and Qin, so he reported the couple's separation. Ye Chen's words about the separation of CEO Huasheng and Qin Hongyang sounded like thunder in the sky for the shocked Zhu Qiang and his daughter. Qian joyfully thanked the heavens that favored them. Yuan Yuan also laughed with joy, But Ye Chen did not understand the reason for such joy. Sitting down on the chair, old woman Wang's granddaughter continued to smile, as if she had a premonition of her victory in love affairs. First calling the guy Ye Chen, then Ye Jr., then Yuan described him as Chen Jr. because he had the same surname as the head of the company. He himself did not understand all this. Reminding the dumbass, as Ji Qiang dared to say, of his work in Huasheng, the guest pointed to President Ye as the guy's boss, and the director's future wife would be Chen's former sister-in-law. The Wang family planned to intermarry with the Huashengs, and when everything worked out, Ye Chen would again be under the control of his former relatives, as Qiang had dreamed. After asking Yuan why she hoped for love from the president, the lady spoke of the impossibility of men resisting her. She took care of herself, and the head of the company immediately fell at the feet of the beauty. Suspecting President Ye of being the one who gave her grandmother a jade bracelet worth 10 million, Yuan saw him as her secret admirer. Surprised by Yuan's conceit, the young man asked not to double-check, because the bracelet had indeed been given to him by President Ye of Huashen. Still unable to believe it, Yuan asked Ye Chen again that the gift was indeed from President Ye, praising her intuition, which never let her down. Looking at her father's laughing face, Yuan told him about the corporation president, who she thought was interested in her. Who could have seen the Huaxing Corporation boss Ji Qiang as his son-in-law, who was delighted by this, and Yuan wanted to please her grandmother as soon as possible upon returning home. To Ye Chen, who was looking at the guest from the outside, they seemed like a vile family who had dreamed in vain of becoming related to the Ye clan. Wenyan inquired about President Ye's whereabouts because she wanted to see him, and he, as Chen said, was in the reception room talking with guests. In response to Yuan's complaints about the company's head being held up due to problematic clients, Chen pointed to his father, who looked at people like trash, and his daughter dressed like a streetwalker who was throwing herself at the president. Wen, who didn't understand the hint, insulted the anonymous guest, calling her actions shameless, and was going to deal with this girl in the meeting room. Stopping his daughter, who was rushing forward, Ji Qiang demanded that she not get excited because she did not want to spoil the first impression in front of President Ye. A dissatisfied Ji Qiang asked his daughter to continue waiting there, urging Chen to immediately inform them as soon as President Ye was free. 5 minutes later, Secretary Zhou conveyed to Mr. Wang President Ye's request to return home due to his departure on business. The irritated guests couldn't believe what they heard, and Chang, who had expected to become the father-in-law of the boss of a large corporation, was the most shocked. The secretary had no idea when the president would be free or whether he would appear in the office after lunch, demanding that visitors leave. Feeling sorry for the president's absence, Yuan wanted to twist him on the spot. Ji Qiang didn't worry about it, because they knew for sure that he had given the bracelet, asking his mother to gather everyone. At the Zhishan villa, Jiayao was surprised by the family gathering again, asking about the signing of the contract, but Yuan, not thinking about it, wanted to share her joy. Relatives were surprised to learn that it was President Yi who gave his grandmother a jade bracelet worth 10 million at her anniversary. Hearing this, Jiayao now really felt like she had worked herself up, and that Ye Chen couldn't possibly give her such a gift. Jiyuan didn't see anything good in this, and Sulan reminded him of the affair between President Ye and Qin, and she was on good terms with the Wangs, so the head of the company gave the gift. Qi Chang told his family about the breakup between President Ye and Qin Hongyan, and since he gave the gift for his beloved, there was no need for him to give the bracelet separately at the end. Only Yuan didn't guess anything. It was obvious to her that the president had given the bracelet to his grandmother for the sake of her beauty, and at that time Jiayao had not yet divorced Ye Chen. To Grandma, this sounded logical, since only a guy in love with Yuan could give such a gift, and the Wang family was lucky that it turned out to be the boss of the Huasheng Corporation. The beauty promised her grandmother that she would cling to the director with a death grip and pull their family into high society. The grandmother only praised her granddaughter for such aspirations. After listening to her relatives, Jiayao doubted the reliability of the source of information about the bracelet, and Yuan pointed to her sister's worthless husband. Looking back at her sister, Yuan told her grandmother that President Ye was busy in the morning, and that she planned to go to the office alone after lunch to sort out the contract. Remembering her sister, Yuan would ask Jiayao to be her personal driver and take her to Huashen's office whenever she had free time. Enraged by this humiliation in front of the whole family by her mean sister, Jiayao shouted that she was busy and therefore had no time to drive her. Sulin rushed after her angry daughter, trying to stop her, but to no avail. Already sitting behind the wheel of her car, the angry girl repeated the insults directed at the anonymous offender. Moving at great speed, Jiayao only saw a large and strong tree in front of her at the last moment. The next moment, the car driven by the unfortunate Wang Jiao crashed into the barrier at full speed. Continuing to scream her hatred, the girl cried and blamed Ye Chen for the accident, because of whom she had been so disgraced. At the Huasheng Corporation office, Ye Chen, working as the general director, was busy signing work documents. Picking up the ringing phone, the boy heard Jiao's angry voice insulting him and shouting her hatred. Wanting to know what was going on, Chen thought about the woman who had learned nothing and was only capable of causing harm, despite the many years that had passed. While insulting the guy, Jiao did not understand why he did not play the role until the end. If he pretended from the beginning and told the truth to her family, thereby disgracing his ex-wife. Finally understanding what she was talking about, Chen generally always told the truth, but it was the van's problem if they didn't believe him. The whole family is convinced that the company boss has a crush on Yuan Yuan, who is praised by her grandmother, and her sister told Jia Yao to become a driver. So if Yuan marries the president, her sister will be forgotten. Yixin responded to his ex-wife's complaint with a question, wondering if the girl still had her precious young master fan. Jiao spoke about Fang Chao's inability to compete with the president, since he was not the head of the family company. Yixin no longer knew whether to be happy about these words or not. While mocking her ex-husband's thoughts with malicious irony, Jiao called Fang Chao 1,000 times better than Ye Chen, even if he was not equal to President Ye. Having been useful to the family, Chao Jiao could walk with her head held high, while Chen was nothing but a disgrace, and the lady now had to deal with the problems he left behind. Thinking of his ex-wife as stupid, Ye Chen threatened to hang up, tenderly listening to her hysterics, because he had a lot of things to sort out. The girl asked the guy not to hang up because he had a request to do something for her. After listening to Wang Jiao with caution, the CEO of Huasheng Corporation wanted to know what she wanted from him. Ye Chen didn't quite understand the girl's desire for Yuan Yuan to have a smooth ride with the corporation president. Jiao asked him to mix a laxative into Yuan Yuan's black tea or to stumble nearby and rip her chipao, which Ye Chen promised to help with, but the president simply would not accept the guest. When Jiao demanded that he stop deceiving her, she reminded him of his job as a security guard for Ye Chen, so his president would definitely not listen. After telling the girl not to believe him, Ye Chen hung up, causing another dose of indignation in Wang Jiao. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the stunning Yuan Yuan went up to President Huasheng's floor again, asking Secretary Zhou to take her to her boss. After apologizing to her guest, Zhou felt it necessary for her to leave, causing surprise to Yuan, who had expected President Ye to be absent until the evening. That's not the point, and the president didn't want to meet Yuan because of her beauty. At the negotiating table, he only looked at her, not thinking about the project, asking to send another family member. Mechanically repeating the request to send someone else, Yuan Yuan couldn't believe that President Ye was calling her beautiful. When Zhou told him about the president watching short videos on Yuan's page, which he followed, the girl was delighted to recognize him as her secret fan. Having promised to send another person, Yuan asked to convey to the president the proposal to go to a movie or have coffee together, and Zhou was ready to carry out the order. Secretary Rong was astonished when she saw the money Yuan Yuan offered her, which the guest took from her blue purse. The girl just wanted to get photos of the CEO of Huasheng Corporation from an employee. Refusing the offered money, the secretary pointed out that she did not have any images of President Yi. Leaning towards the guest, the secretary whispered to her that the boss was incredibly handsome and that they were about the same age. As Secretary Zhou said goodbye to Yuan Yuan, she smiled sweetly at her and thought of her guest as a curvy but stupid girl. The beautiful city of Man in the country of tea amazed with its tall buildings, incredible architecture, long bridges, and bright lights. While pouring a drink into Watermelon's glass, Liu Zhengkun was intrigued by the sudden visit of the guest from Yunzhou, not understanding what could have happened. Unable to hide anything from Mr. Liu, Brother Watermelon told him about new problems in Yunzhou, and therefore came to ask for help. After hearing the details, Liu Zhengkun smashed a glass on Watermelon's head, leaving him with almost 80 people and only 10 left. With a broken forehead, Watermelon asked to be forgiven for his worthlessness and was ready to be punished personally by Mr. Liu. Having lit a cigar, Zheng Kun asked his ward to forget. Times had changed and waving his fists no longer made sense. Calling himself and his charges people living in darkness, with no place in the sun, he left Yunzhou and moved to the impoverished regions of Southeast Asia. If Watermelon had even half of Mr. Liu's brains, he would not have fallen into such a life, and the villain asked the gentleman for 100 people to be able to take revenge. Before starting to talk on the phone, Zheng Kun recalled the orphan childhood that Arbuz also had, and that he owed everything he had now to Mr. Fan. When the owner began to speak ingratiatingly to Mr. Fan, Watermelon recognized the same legendary authority who had been able to bring Mr. Liu into the world. While talking about his imminent trip to Yunzhou and his intention to visit Mr. Fan, Liu learned that he was already in the city, so he decided to go there soon to see his benefactor. Mr. Liu considered the guest lucky due to Mr. Fan's stay in Yunzhou, and the delighted Watermelon wanted to go with the host to meet their forefather. Having struck the unsuspecting guest again, Mr. Liu did not see him as someone who could freely meet with Mr. Fan if he himself had to make an appointment. After asking Watermelon to book the tickets, Liu was planning to visit Mr. Fan and deal with that kid named Ye Chen at the same time. Having readily listened to the order, Brother Watermelon was happy about it, hoping to eliminate his enemy Ye Chen. As the dark evening approached, the Wang family mansion was brightly lit and bustling with activity. Just Cheng couldn't believe Wen Yuan's words about President Ye's inability to meet her because of her beauty, believing the head of the company was in love with her. Since President Hua Sheng asked to send someone else to him, the next day Zhu Yao sent Xiao Jai to him. After reading the message about Ye Chen regretting his birth tomorrow, Xiao was overjoyed to see his opponent. The next day, guests arriving in Yunzhou were received in Mr. Fan's large and spacious villa. Mr. Liu Zhengkun and the young man standing next to him bowed respectfully to Mr. Fan, who was standing in front. The owner of the house, sitting importantly on the chair, demanded that Zhengkun stop bowing, since he himself was already the boss. Liu owed all his wealth to Mr. Fan, promising not to forget his kindness, but he did not understand why his virtue had returned to Yunzhou after living in England. Holding a cup of coffee in his hand, Mr. Fan mentioned the old master who sent him to help the third young master. Liu Jun could never imagine that the young master was in the city, knowing him as the real boss standing above Mr. Fang and ruling the world. Having ordered Liu to keep an eye on his dogs so that they did not dare to get underfoot, Mr. Fang threatened him with punishment if they disturbed the third young master. Having asked the owner of the house to show the appearance of the young master, Liu was afraid for his fools who would risk crossing this man's path, because then it would be the end. When the servant put a photo of that same master in front of the people, Mr. Fan told them about this guy's family trial, demanding that they not interfere in his affairs. Taking the photograph in his hands, Liu Zhengkun began to carefully examine the image of this mysterious young man. To Liu, the third young master seemed very handsome, which distinguished him as the heir to a great clan. But Zheng wanted to take a look at him, and Fang told him about the boy's stay in Yunzhou for 2 more years. Remembering the gang Liu had assembled in Asia, Fan didn't understand the reasons for his return, but the guest Arbuz's brother had problems, so he was here with the fighters to help his relative. After speaking rudely about Liu's activities, Mr. Fang demanded that he not create problems for the third young master. Jakun, who immediately understood everything, began to bow to the owner of the house, and Fan offered him a game of chess, wanting to see his new skills. Huashing Xiaojai, who had been sitting in the reception room for 2 hours, was outraged by the president's reluctance to receive him, who was so cold to his future brother-in-law, and decided to find out everything from Ye Chen. Hearing the ringtone, Ye Chen picked up his smartphone, feeling very displeased to learn about Xiaojai's call. Arriving in the reception area 5 minutes later, Ye Chen asked his guest what he wanted, while Xiao demanded to know where his president was. With a hint of irony, Ye Chen explained to his visitor the busyness of the company's head, who at that time was talking to a feeble-minded person. The laughing guest also considered the president's guest to be a moron who was wasting the corporation's boss's time, but for Ye Chen, Xiao was that same fool. Considering his acquaintance to be a show-off, Xiao wanted to know why he behaved like that, since he was a pathetic bodyguard, but dressed like an important person in the company. Reminding Ye Chen how he beat him up in front of all the important people in Yunzhou, the villain promised not to forget this act to the boy. Chen talked about Watermelon's attempt at revenge, but Xiao asked him not to rejoice, since the villain was preparing for a new fight with 100 bandits, so Chen had to look back in the evening on his way home from work. Reflecting on the hater's words, the CEO was worried about Qin Hongyan, with whom he went to work, so that she would not be harmed by the bandits. Deciding to end it now, Chen urged Xiao to invite the villains to the underground parking lot and not bother them with making them wait for the guy near the office. The delighted Xiao was about to order Watermelon to call the bandits and hope for Ye Chen's courage to wait for them at the packing site, which he himself was eagerly awaiting. Soon the guys found themselves downstairs, where the cars of the Huasheng Corporation employees were located in a dark room. The CEO looked at Xiaojai, who was running back and forth in the underground room, in astonishment. With an evil chuckle, Xiao boasted about destroying the CCTV cameras, ensuring that no evidence would remain even if he beat Ye Chen to death. Yehan was delighted by this factor and had no intention of holding back, since if Xiaojai died, there would be no evidence left either. The frightened Xiao Jai did not understand what his opponent was planning, but soon received several blows to the face just like last time. Ye Chen thought Xiao was an idiot who demanded that he stop because the guy wouldn't wait, but beat up the offender who called a group of bandits on him. Only when Ye Chen grabbed the battered Xiao Jai by the shirt did he hear a cry, demanding that he immediately release young Master Wang. The approaching Watermelon ordered his attackers to quickly capture the general director of the Huaxing Corporation. Ye Chen was left alone against several strong villains, ready to pounce on him and kill him at any second. The first criminal who rushed at the guy received a strong blow to the face, and Ye Chen managed to kick away the second bandit. The 10 people fighting were indeed no slouch for Ye Chen, and Xiao had even threatened to make the guy an invalid, never being able to work as a bodyguard again. Watermelon suggested that Chen not fight, since he wouldn't be able to stand up to the professionals. But if the boy would kneel and call him big brother, the villain would spare him. The guy, mindful of his honor, called his rivals unworthy of such a picture with his participation. Mr. Liu Watermelon asked to send 10 more fighters due to the fact that the current guys could not hold out for more than 10 minutes, after which Chen would break them. Mr. Liu, who needed a location for his visit, did not know about the existence of a master in the country who could fight against 10 people and wanted to take him to his place. 10 minutes later, Mr. Liu Zhengkun arrived at the underground parking lot of Huaxing Corporation to assist his subordinates. The frightened Watermelon was delighted by the long-awaited arrival of his older comrade, who promised support. Once he reached Mr. Liu, the unfortunate bandit began to lament, complaining about the need to send 100 fighters to eliminate Ye Chen from the very beginning. Glancing out of the corner of his eye at the intruder, Mr. Liu ordered him to move away further to get a better view of the battlefield. Mr. Zhengkun really wanted to get a good look at what the famous and brave Ye Chen looked like when he fought his opponents. Although Ye Chen fought off 10 bandits, they had exhausted almost all of his strength, and if another 10 appeared, the guy would be in trouble. Looking at the group of villains, the young man planned to capture the leader of the gang in order to neutralize them, but first he wanted to disable this Mr. Liu. Xiao Jai, laughing, suggested that Ye Chen should not cross Mr. Liu, and if he valued his life, he should beg for forgiveness on his knees. Suddenly, Liu Zhengkun was horrified as he finally took a good look at the young man in front of him. Recognizing the man who had stood up to 10 fighters, Liu could barely speak, but Xiao Jai, who was standing behind him, asked the gentleman to kill Ye Chen. To his complete surprise, the evil Xiao Jai received a powerful punch from Mr. Liu, almost sending him flying. Holding his face red from the beating with his hand, the young villain did not understand Mr. Liu's attitude towards him. The next moment, Liu Zhengkun fell to his knees in front of Ye Chen, bowing to the young master. Ye Chen's face resembled Liu, the third young master from the photo he had already seen, so the Asian gang leader called himself Master Fan's Man. Ye Chen recognized the man who was asking for punishment for his misdeed today, for which even 100 deaths would not be enough, as a representative of Butler Fan's faction. Shocked by Mr. Liu's words, Xiao called Ye Chen a poor hanger-on from his family, not understanding why he was the owner, and Watermelon thought his boss had confused the enemy with someone else. Zhengkun demanded that Watermelon fall to his knees before his young master, a reason for which the villainous brother could not understand at all. Grabbing the puzzled Watermelon, Mr. Liu demanded that he bow 100 times, and if he didn't strike even one blow, the bandit would start all over again. Following Mr. Liu's orders, Watermelon called himself a blind idiot, begging for forgiveness for being a fool who could not see anything around him. Xiao Jai, who didn't understand what was happening, didn't know since when Ye Chen became the boss of the bandit brother Watermelon. In a cold tone, Chen ordered Watermelon to stop hitting his forehead and explained to the Wang family that Ye had not sold any watches to the bandit. Right now, Watermelon, who wanted to tell, pointed at Xiao Jai, who had ordered this to be done, causing him to panic and asking him not to give him up so easily. Having captured Xiao, Mr. Liu ordered his men to immediately throw the criminal into the river for attempting to slander their young master. Xiao Jai, falling to his knees and almost in tears, begged his son-in-law to save him from the bandits who were trying to kill him, reminding him of their relationship. Xiao Chen walked away from him in disgust, not considering himself a son-in-law, and Ji begged him to forgive him, admitting his mistake, promising to give Yuan back and bring the drunken Jiayao. After kicking Xiao, the evil Chen was amazed at the villain's behavior because Jiayao and Yui were his sisters, and he was putting them under others to save his life. Captured by bandits, Xiao asked his son-in-law to rescue him, and Ye Chen ordered that he be released this time. Upon returning home, Xiao Jai, on Ye Chen's orders, had to tell in detail how he had previously set up his son-in-law. Instantly starting off like a marathon runner, the repentant Xiao promised to do everything. thanking Brother Chen. Mr. Liu introduced himself to the young master as Zheng Kun, Mr. Fan's man, and he brought 100 fighters from Asia, ready to serve faithfully and truly. By ordering Liu to take his men away, Ye Chen could still use them for his own purposes in the future. Returning to the Shishan villa, when his family asked about the dents on his face, Xiao pointed out that he had been driving carelessly, which was why he had been hit. Not wanting to get into trouble because of Ye Chen's connection with some bandits, Xiao told his grandmother and uncle about his setup of his son-in-law, who did not steal the expensive watch. Not seeing the tragedy in the setup, Old Lady Wang did not consider Ye Chen a saint either, suspecting him of stealing someone else's house. Otherwise, the scoundrel would not have found the money for a five-star hotel. Suggesting that they forget what happened, the old woman wanted to know whether her grandson had been able to meet President Ye at Huashen's office. As if not noticing Jia Yao, the old lady was indignant at the high opinion that President Ye had of her, as if he had expected her to come and bow to him. Jia Yao asked her grandmother for permission to go to Huasheng, since she and Ye Chen were creating the project, and the president himself simply wanted to talk to one of the authors. An indignant Yuan Yuan recalled how the entire family had begged the head of the company, and he had accepted no one, but had supposedly had to listen to her sister, who thought too much of herself. Giving Jia Yao her consent, her grandmother did not object to her initiative to go to President Ye, causing a storm of indignation in her second granddaughter. If Jia Yao also returns empty-handed, Grandma Wang will personally appear before President Yi, and their family is obliged to sign a contract with Huasheng at any cost. 2 hours after the family conversation, Jia Yao walked into the lobby of Huasheng's office and asked Secretary Zhou about President Ye's presence. After asking Mrs. Wang to wait in the reception room due to the president's current busy schedule, Rong brought the guest her tea. When Wang Jiayao received the cup, it was just ordinary warm water with honey, but the lady did not refuse the drink. Sitting down on the chair, the girl recalled how, for the past 3 years, her ex-husband Ye Chen had brought her a glass of honey water. In the president's office, his deputy Qin Hongyan stood in front of Ye Chen and reported on Wang Jiayao's presence in the office. Approaching the thoughtful boss, the girl waited for his instructions regarding whether to let the guest in or not. Ye Chen had already kicked out Zhi Qiang, Yuan Yuan, and Xiao Jai. If he sent Jiayao home, the family would think they were being walked all over. But since the head of the company had decided to cooperate, they could take their millions. After ordering Qin Hongyan to bring him the cooperation agreement, the young man began to wait for him in his office. Then Ye Chen opened the door slightly to see the guest who was so eager to visit the CEO. Frightened by Ye Chen, Jia Yao looked in amazement at the guy for whom she had previously always worn something similar at home. She was homely, cozy, cute, and beautiful. Considering President Ye's busy schedule, Jia Yao didn't expect to see him anytime soon, so she asked her ex-husband to accompany her. While busy with work, Ye Chen had no common topics to talk about with Wang Jiayao, who had visited him to discuss a project. Ye Chen asked the girl to read the contract and sign it if she was ready to accept it, and the Wang family would receive 70 million in 3 tranches within a week. Taking the document, Jia Yao was surprised by President Ye's agreement to implement the project, but she thought he would want to discuss all the details first. Opening the folder, the girl became nervous when she saw the inscription, First Class Jia Yao, on the back of the cover. Jia Yao looked up at the CEO of Huasheng Corporation in amazement, not understanding why the project was given that name. Old Lady Wang's granddaughter suddenly remembered how, 6 months ago, when Ye Chen was creating the concept for the future dementia, it was he who came up with the name. Sitting in a simple shirt at his laptop, Ye Chen talked about creating a project for his wife, suggesting that they call it First Class Jia Yao. Ye Chen came up with the project for his wife's sake, wanting to name it in her honor, and even if the Wang family refused after 3 years of the dependent's life, the guy would implement it with his own money. It was a gift to his beloved wife, who was now sitting on the sofa in the young man's office and did not realize that the project was named in her honor. Ye Chen had no idea about Jia Yao's future betrayal, and the private mansion sounded like a dead man's house, so he had to change the name because of such a bad omen. Asking Chen if he had begged the president to choose the name, Jia Yao couldn't understand why the company's head listened to a security guard who could only crawl on his knees. The next moment, the girl approached the young man and, taking his hand, expressed words of gratitude. Chen explained everything by the president's love for the word Jia Yao, which sounds like beautiful dish. According to the girl, the head of state agreed to this because of the requests of the guard who still loved her. After asking his ex-wife to stop chatting, the corporation's CEO demanded that she sign the project. After signing and stamping the document, Jia Yao thought of her grandmother, who would be over the moon if her granddaughter managed to secure the contract. When Ye Qin was about to take a copy of the document for the archives, Jia Yao suddenly asked him to stop. The lady, overjoyed by Ye Qin's help, wanted to thank him with lunch, suggesting they go to a cafe outside the city that he had long liked. The busy Ye Qin had no time to have lunch, and the cafe, the name of which she didn't remember, although they had been there many times, was called Chicken Noodle, and the guy clearly saw the lack of love for him from Jia Yao. The disappointed girl screamed, reminding him of how many times they had gone to that cafe just for Ye Chen, and that already said a lot. If Ye Chen didn't want to go to that place, his ex-wife was willing to go there with Fang Chao to eat steaks. The girl suddenly fell silent when she saw the beautiful Qin Hongyan entering the CEO's office. Recognizing the vice president of Huasheng Corporation, the girl remained silent when Ye Chen's deputy greeted her politely. Reciprocating the feelings, Jia Yao wanted to leave the inhospitable office as quickly as possible to go outside. Looking back at Jia Yao, Qin thought of her as a foolish woman who decided to challenge President Ye with the idiotic Fang Chao. Glancing at her boss, the beauty noticed, based on his reaction, how he was still not indifferent to his ex-wife. Acknowledging the difficult and thorny path to President Ye's heart, Qin suggested that he break the contract and cancel the deal with the Wan family if Jia Yao had angered the guy. Ye Chen, who continued to stare at one spot, did not want to go back on his own words. Overhearing her boss's conversation, Qin spoke of her love for food and new interesting places, suggesting that he go to Chicken Noodles. As if reluctantly, Ye Chen agreed to go to a cafe with his subordinate, who mentally rejoiced over this. When the couple approached the cafe an hour and a half later, Ye Chen, as part of his warning, called the establishment not a five-star restaurant, but a dive where the lady might not like the food. While denying the status of delicious food, Qin spoke of her love for cheap tofu, and she was no pampered princess who frequented elite establishments. Agreeing with the girl, Ye Chen remembered how she managed to get to the top without the help of her rich relatives. She was clearly experiencing grief, so she was not considered a rich person. Suddenly grabbing President Ye's hand, the girl began to apologize, citing the fear of tripping in her heels due to the uneven threshold. Qin Hongyan obediently agreed with the guy, who assured his lady that everything was fine, promising to help her and asking her to hold on. At that moment, the young man remembered how for the last 3 years, he had dreamed of going into a cafe holding Jia Yao's hand, but she always refused her husband. Thinking back to his ex-wife and her current lover, Ye Chen came to the conclusion that she was now being held and embraced by a completely different man. Seeing her companion suddenly turn pale, the frightened Qin Hongyan became worried about her president. Looking at the girl, Ye Chen asked her not to worry, and outside the office she could just call him by his first name. Pointing to the young man's deeply upset appearance, Qin wanted to know his thoughts that had caused such sadness. Having replied that he hadn't thought of anything, Ye Chen was willing to bet that Wang Jiao and his lover were currently cooing like doves and eating steaks in a cafe. While Qin was still guessing, Ye Chen, remembering Liu Zhengkun, was thinking about ordering him to break the third leg of the hated Fang Chao. At the healthy food restaurant QY in XR Shopping Mall, a friend asked Jia Yao why she had dragged her out to lunch today. Wang Jiao, with a sweet expression on her face, handed her friend a blue folder, inviting her to look at its contents. Looking at the document, the amazed Song Hongye was not only amazed by the lady's ability to sign the contract with Huasheng on behalf of the family, but also by the fact that the project was named after her. A flustered Song, unable to understand how this could have happened, admitted that her friend might have needed to sleep with President Yi, but an offended Jia Yao denied everything. With a smirk, Song Hongye reminded her friend of her desire to rent a room with Fang Chao for the sake of investment for her own family. After taking back the contract and calling Song a fool, Jia Yao contacted Fang Chao because of his promise to solve the Wall family's financial problems. While holding the project in her hands, Jia Yao actually wanted to show the result in order to gain Grandmother Wang's approval and respect for the branch to which her granddaughter belonged. Remembering Ye Chen as an ordinary courier, but he came up with an excellent project, Jia Yao herself wanted to help him implement it, but no one knew that it all ended in divorce. Jia Yao thought of herself as sacrificing herself for the sake of her family and future with her husband, but he made her feel guilty as she was only dating Chao for investments, and Hong Ye was thinking nonsense. Asking her friend not to be angry, the smiling Su Hongye perceived Jia Yao as the purest and most innocent girl in the world. When her surprised friend asked why the project was named after Jia Yao, the girl answered by pointing to Ye Chen, who was pleading with the corporation's director to do so. Recalling Jia Yao's betrayal of her husband, Song Hongye was surprised at how he groveled before the president, trampling his pride just to have the project named after his ex-wife, explaining it as love. Sun Hongye paid her respects to her friend, who considered herself the first beauty of Yunzhou. Having suggested that they act as she had already said, Hongye recommended that the girl marry Feng Chao and with the help of his family, bring the Wang clan into the city's high society, and then enter into a fight with Xiao Jai and Yuan Yuan. After the death of her grandmother, Wang Jiayao would be able to take half of the fortune, or at least $500 million. If Chao started to irritate her, then Jiayao could divorce him. She wouldn't even be 30, and the girl would already be a billionaire. She could find a younger boyfriend or get her ex back. While telling her all this, Song Hongye asked Jiayao not to forget her friend, who immediately agreed with a dreamy expression. Raising their cups in a toast, Wang Jiayao asked her friend to keep their fists for her. At 7 o'clock in the evening at the Shishan Villa, Yuan Yuan was indignant about the gathering of the Jiayao family as she was going to the cinema. Ji Chao asked his daughter not to get excited, admitting the news about the contract with Huasheng. Loudly placing the contract on the table, Wang Jiaya solemnly announced the signing of the contract with the corporation and the transfer of $70 million to the family account day by day. Jumping up from their seats, the astonished father and daughter screamed in unison, not believing what their relative had said. Continuing to express her distrust of her sister's words, an angry Yuan Yuan grabbed the document and began to examine it. Stunned by first-class Jiayao, Yuan was certain that her sister had forged the document's title. Amazed at her conceit and angry at the audacity of naming a family project after herself. Reminding Uncle Zir Xiao of his camaraderie with Vice President Qin, Jiayao inquired about the lady's possible call to him. Grabbing his smartphone, Xiao began to ask Qin about the contract, surprised that it had actually been signed and renamed. After finishing his conversation with the vice president, the man looked up and informed his surprised daughter of the authenticity of the contract. The grandmother, who praised her granddaughter for her excellent work, would never have thought that she could have knocked out $70 million by promising a reward for it. Unaware of what her sister had done to President Yi, Yuan desperately wanted to know the reason why the project was named after Jiayao, but the latter had never even seen it. Yuan suspected her sister of wanting to deceive her, not believing that the president had signed a contract with her, reminding the girl of her divorce and calling the man his own, threatening not to come between her and Ye. Having loudly expressed her indignation, Yuan Yuan headed for the exit, ignoring her grandmother's call. With the project document in hand, Jiayao convinced her grandmother that she had not attempted to seduce anyone and that she had achieved the signing of the contract honestly. Grandma appointed Zurichang as the project leader, and Jiayao and her father became his deputies and had to work hard to see the project through to completion, indignantly reminding everyone that the project was named after herself and that the contract had been concluded on her own. Jiayao did not understand why she was not the main one. Having hit the girl with his elbow, Ji Chang shouted at her, accusing her of insolence because she was only the youngest in the family, but decided to jump above her head. Old Lady Wang asked her granddaughter to temporarily work under her father and uncle due to her lack of experience, and if she showed good results, her grandmother would entrust her with more authority. Bowing her head, the girl briefly agreed with her grandmother's words, continuing to hold the agreement document with the Huasheng Corporation. After thanking her grandmother, Jiayao promised to work for the benefit of the Wang family, mentally resolving to not let anyone take credit for her achievements once she achieved strength. Back at her home, Yuan Yuan continued to insult her unfortunate sister, considering her a divorcee who had the audacity to pester President Ye without shame. The girl had put so much effort into her figure, working like crazy, and stupid Jiayan tried to ruin it all. Ye Yuanyuan, who absolutely did not want to let her sister contact the president, was at a loss for words when suddenly the necessary thought appeared in her head. Considering that the best way out for herself was to marry Jiayao, Yuan picked up her smartphone to make a call. If Jiayao became a married woman, she would not be able to make eyes at President Ye, so Yuan urgently asked her brother for Fang Chao's number. Hearing Yuan Yuan's voice, Chao was surprised, not understanding why the curvy beauty was calling him, but he was already about to add her personal number to the chat. Quietly calling the guy a male, the girl expressed hope for a good conversation with Chao, hoping that he would have some free time. Since Fan was not busy, Yuan told him about Jiayao signing a contract with Huasheng for $70 million and naming the project after her, and everyone in the family was talking about the president's sympathy for the girl. Fang Chao, crying out in surprise, knew President Ye of Huasheng Company as a man whose power no one in Yunzhou could match. Suggesting that Brother Fan act quickly before it was too late, Yuan Yuan advised him to propose to her sister right away. Being crazy about Jiayao, Fan knew how recently divorced she was and was afraid to propose quickly, but Yuan called her sister the first beauty of the city, who could be quickly taken away. Agreeing with the girl's words for Chao Fang, Jia Yao, although divorced, was still the girl who had nothing with Ye Qin. Fang Chou almost got the girl into bed that time at the hotel, but the courier who arrived ruined everything, and she promised the gentleman to meet another time. Not intending to miss the chance, if there were those in the Wang family who were willing to play along with him, Fang decided to take advantage of this by taking Jia Yao for himself, so he hoped for Yuan's help. A gray car pulled up next to the red car driven by Qin as it was leaving the parking lot. After leaving the car's showroom, the vice president of the Huaxing Corporation asked Fang Chao what he needed there. Due to Qin Chao's reluctance to answer the call, he had to look for her here and start talking to her, since Ye Chen worked for this lady. A girl's question regarding his business with her was directed at Fan Chao, who was greedily examining women's charms. The vice president was only surprised by the mention of Ye Chen when Fang reminded her of his intention to not let this guy find refuge in Yunzhou when he was at the anniversary. Ye Hen lived in a 5-star hotel and became a bodyguard in Huaxing, so Fang promised to pay him 10 years' salary so that Qin would fire him, and in return Chao promised to repay the lady. Hearing the proposal to fire Ye Chen and the willingness to pay him for 10 years, Qin Hongyan couldn't believe her ears. Perceiving Ye Chen as a security guard with a salary of 200,000 a year and 10 times that would be 2 million, Fan assured that he had such sums. Refusing to decide such things due to lack of authority, Qin initially planned to call Ye Chen and ask him, mentally considering the proposal to be extremely funny. Hearing the incoming call, Ye Chen picked up the phone and talked to Qin about Fang Chao's visit to her. The girl spoke about Chao's offer to let Ye Chen resign from Huaxin and pay him 10 years' salary in advance, ironically calling the deal tempting. The guy who had no intention of thinking agreed to receive 10 times his salary and was preparing to quit after transferring money to Fan Chao's account. After ending the phone call, Qin Hongyan informed Fang that Ye Chen had agreed to leave. As Fan thought, the poor Ye Chen was ready to go anywhere when he was offered money, and Chao asked Qin to send him the boy's account number. Fang, having received the omer from Qin, promised to transfer the money, asking the amount of Ye Chen's annual salary in the company, not allowing it to be more than 200,000. Not having heard the figure of 6,700,000 a year, and 67 million over 10 years the first time, Chao entered the data into the phone. Upon hearing the 67 million, Fan began to shout indignantly, pointing at the CEO who did not earn that much in Huaxing. Considering Qin's actions to be mocking, Chao seriously wanted to ransom Ye Chen, but the girl was also absolutely serious. Kuwen demanded that the guy tone down his arrogance. If he didn't have that kind of money, there would always be someone richer and stronger, so you can't look down on people. Before getting into the car, Fan didn't mind protecting Qin Hongyan, Ye Chen, who had now become her little dog, as long as the girl didn't regret it later. After telling Qin about his intention to propose to Jia Yao and the upcoming wedding, Fang made sure to invite the vice president and her guard dog to the celebration. As he was leaving, Fan burst into laughter and asked the girl to train Ye Chen properly so that he wouldn't howl like a beaten dog at the ceremony. Thinking of Fang Chao as an idiot, Qin was sure that everything his family had built over decades would collapse because of this fool. Hoping for Fang Chao and Jia Yao to get married soon, Qin Hongyan hoped that Ye Chen would soon forget about this girl, and then she would have a chance. In his office at the Huaxing Corporation headquarters, the CEO was receiving another visitor, looking out the window. Unable to understand the reason for Ye Chen's summons, Yunzhou restaurant business owner Zheng Hong couldn't understand the reason for his presence there. The head of the company wanted to buy out all of the businessman's restaurants, guaranteeing to destroy Zhang Wei's business within 2 months, leaving him no place in the city. Rejoicing at Ye Chen's desire to buy out his business, Zheng Hong asked for 60 million for the 7 restaurants, promising his full support, and within 2 months they would crush Zhang Wei. Having agreed, Ye Chen remembered how, at the old woman's anniversary, Zhang Wei had threatened the guy to cut off the oxygen supply in Yunzhou's restaurant business. By signing the document, Ye Chen returned the favor, intending to erase the villain's name from the city's restaurant industry. A few days later, people strolling along Penglai Shopping Street looked at the familiar restaurant, which had changed its name. The name of the restaurant, Cloudy, sounded respectable, and people assumed that it belonged to the owner, extraterrestrial Zhang Wei, when they planned to visit him in the evening for dinner. A man in a suit and bow tie, loudly slamming his fist on the table, was indignant at the change of name of the restaurant across the street, considering it a challenge to his extraterrestrial from the beyond the clouds. The young man told about Mr. Zheng selling his restaurants 2 days ago, so the new owners could have come up with such a name. Thinking about the upstart who decided to compete with Zhang Wei, the businessman was going to send him out into the world without pants on his legs, because only Wei is #1 in the restaurant business of Yunzhou. Having ordered his servant to keep an eye on the restaurant opposite, the entrepreneur wanted to do important things, intending to control everything. Zhang Wei spoke to the employees standing in 2 rows about today's extremely important marriage proposal, demanding that everything be prepared to the highest standard and without any mistakes. At the Tiffany luxury jewelry boutique, a salesperson was handing over a custom-made ring to a young Mr. Fan. After taking the purchase, Chao, with an important face, thought about getting Wang Jiayao in one fell swoop by making her a grand marriage proposal. Jiayao suggested Chao grab a quick bite somewhere, since she had a ton of work to do as the deputy head of the project, but Fan had reserved a table at the extraterrestrial. To make his speech more convincing, the gentleman reminded his companion of the location of the extraterrestrial near the lady's office. The boy and girl standing in front of the golden sign looked at it, considering this place to be a new restaurant. To Wang Jiayao, the establishment looked very luxurious, but Fan couldn't even imagine when this restaurant had opened opposite the extraterrestrial. Having assessed the amazing establishment, which obviously belonged to Zhang Wei, if it was opposite the outer world, Fan agreed to go with her to have dinner at the Cloud City. A young man in a white suit watched from the balcony of a building as people below, confused as to what the man in front of them was doing. Workers held balloons, onlookers witnessed a marriage proposal from a wealthy man, and a restaurant reservation cost 100,000. The people, amazed by the incredible spectacle, were captivated by the show, not even noticing the incredible beauty of the girl next to them. One of the eyewitnesses was ready to give 10 years of his life for a night with Jiayao. The second considered such people to be the property of the rich only, and the poor had no reason to even look at them. Chen looked at Ye Chen, who was mentally outraged by Fang Chao taking his place in his restaurant, disturbing the guests, and proposing marriage to the director's woman. Zhou Chen arrived and gave the order to immediately tell the managers to remove all this garbage from the second floor, including the microphones. Meanwhile, Fang Chao, kneeling on one knee and holding a ring box in one hand, tried to propose to Jiayao. Suddenly, people in white uniforms began to interfere with the entire solemn procedure, to the horror of the would-be husband. Using needles, the staff began to prick the balloons, which burst like soap bubbles. Fan, outraged by the tyranny, demanded an answer to the question of why balloons intended for declarations of love were being popped, and demanded that the roses not be swept away. The laughing people in the room were discussing how the waiters had nipped Fang Chao's plans for romance in the bud, and Jiayao only now realized that the gentleman wanted to propose to her. The onlookers who looked at Jiayao would have felt sorry if she had gone to another rich kid, but the girl herself felt relieved. Fang Chao quickly demanded that the restaurant staff call the owner, as if he did not know about the presence of such an important guest. Before even noticing the owner approaching, Chao was shouting about his status and family, demanding that the owner know what he was worth in Yunzhou. Ye Chen, who was descending the stairs, calmly wanted to find out why the guest was shouting, because if he didn't want to eat, then it would be better if he didn't disturb others. Upon seeing Ye Chen, Fang Chao started shouting even louder, telling the guy not to interfere in other people's business, as the guest wanted to talk to the owner of the restaurant. The young man, who was accompanied by his secretary Zhou Rongrong and the vice president of Huaxing Company, Qin Hongyan, called himself the owner of the restaurant. Chao stood with his mouth open in surprise. Wang Jiayao couldn't believe what she heard. Laughing at Ye Chen's words about his ownership of the Cloud City, Fan already knew that Zheng Hong had not only sold this place, but that all of his restaurants in the city had been bought by one person. When Chao doubted the ability of the penniless Chen to pay 60 million for restaurants, the guy promised to increase her salary tenfold for hitting the hooligan with a mop. Impressed by such a large sum of money, the woman immediately struck at the loud villain. She ignored the bully's claims, threatening the woman with punishment, and did what her boss, who was paying her, ordered. Previously unaware of who had dared to ruin the moment of his proposal, Fan recognized Ye Chen as the offender, accusing him of being extremely jealous because of all this. The guy reminded him in an indifferent tone about his previous divorce from Jiayao, so Chao's nasty jokes didn't bother him. But in Ye Che's restaurant, only his rules applied, and without the owner's permission, Fang Chao couldn't lift a finger. The villain had no intention of believing in Ye Chen's financial ability to buy a restaurant and hire a famous singer, and to consider Qin the real owner. Turning to Fan, Miss Hongyan only confirmed that she had a share in this business, since earning money together with the boss was a normal thing. Flashing his ring, Fan allowed Ye Chen to invest a maximum of 200,000 in the restaurant, which was a measly 1%, and he had nothing to show for it. Chow was a different matter. The ring was 3 carats worth over 4 million, and Ye Chen, even in his entire career as a bodyguard, would never have bought something like that for Jia Yao. Kneeling down in front of the astonished Wang Jiao, the young boar persistently proposed marriage. Wen Haiyan, who was watching this, saw Fang Chao as the kind of person who was now openly humiliating her boss. Looking at her companion, Qin could get a chance to get closer to him if Jia Yao responded positively to Fan's proposal. Ye Chen watched his ex-wife closely, waiting to hear her consent to marry Fang Chao. In the girl's understanding, Chao was not acting according to plan, and Ye Chen was nearby, so she asked her fiancé to give her some time to think. For Fan Jiayao, Yunzhou's #1 beauty was the first, so it would be strange to hear her consent the first time, and the guy was ready to agree and wait. Having stood up, Fan approached the girl and good-naturedly asked her to accept the expensive ring. If Jia Yao had just wanted it, a ton of men would have lined up to give her diamonds, while Ye Chen always called himself a boss and a restaurateur, but had never given her a ring before. But at that very moment, asking her ex-husband to forget her words, the girl reminded him how Chen was an ordinary hanger-on, and there was no point in talking to him anymore. If his wife hadn't betrayed her husband, as he had reminded her, then right now Ye Chen would have given his beloved a ring with a 21-carat diamond. Recalling how they went to see the film of the same name a year ago, Jia Yao was indignant at the lack of romance and the gift of a ring, but a year later her husband promised to give her a ring with a 21-carat diamond. With her back to her ex-husband, the upset girl called him a cheater. Chen told Ye Chen, who was holding a cup of tea, that Wang Jiao's groom would probably give her a positive answer later. Even though she hadn't said yes today, she hadn't refused either. Asking if the boss would like Jia Yao and Feng Chao to marry, and if after they were married, he would come to them, calling himself President Huasheng, so that his ex-wife would bite her elbows or not. Putting his cup of tea on the saucer, the young man agreed with only half of what the girl said. Ye Chen didn't intend to wait for this moment after Jia Yao and Fang Chao's wedding. He was preparing to do it right on the day of their wedding. On the very day when Wang Jiayao was thinking about marrying a billionaire, Ye Chen would show her who the real billionaire was. When Jiayao thought she had hit the jackpot and entered high society, she would realize what a billionaire she had missed out on, and in Qin's mind, Ye Chen had put an end to his relationship with his ex-wife. Looking at CEO Huasheng drinking tea with some anxiety, Qin once again thought about his intention to stop doing anything with Jiayao. The employee who approached admitted that the boss was right, and the investigation revealed that the invited singer's microphone had been swapped just before he went on stage. Impressed by Ye Chen's observation skills, Qin didn't rule out a disaster during the performance if the boss hadn't noticed anything and ordered him to return it. Having identified the hooligan who had done this, who had mingled with the guests from the cameras, the staff brought him here, but he denied any wrongdoing and pretended to be simply drinking with friends. Ye Chen, who sat importantly on a chair at the table, wanted to know the name of the one who sent this man, suspecting Zhong Wei. The hooligan's eyes darted around as he denied knowing Zhong Wei, so Ye Chen assumed the restaurant businessman was the culprit. When Chen demanded that he give him the phone, the man began to refuse, simultaneously getting indignant at the guy in the suit and calling him a rude word. Ye Chen was just about to take harsh measures against the rude man, but he was stopped by Qin Hongyan. Stepping forward, the brave girl wanted to try to expose the villain herself, much to Ye Chen's surprise. The captured hooligan may have looked frail, but he was still a man, so Ye Chen doubted Qin's ability to deal with him. The man looked at Qin with admiration, judging her figure to be 10 times better than that of the streetwalker he had rented for 688 yuan yesterday. Having suddenly grabbed the hooligan at high speed, the girl was sure that his phone contained the contacts of the person who had paid him to disrupt the event. The guy, experiencing severe pain and pressing the unlock button on the gadget, asked the girl to put it down. Qin Hongyan grabbed the smartphone and threw it to Ye Chen, who quickly caught it with a deft movement. Raising his head, the corporation boss suddenly shouted, demanding that the girl beware of the villain who had rushed at her and lost his phone. Qin Hongyan, displaying incredible reflexes and speed, grabbed the bully by the shoulders and deftly threw him to the floor. Holding the bandit, who was screaming in pain, the girl asked the president for forgiveness for distracting him from his tea party. Hugging the corporation's vice president, Secretary Zhou Rongrong admired her boss's actions, knowing how to become her bodyguard. The villain, who was not calming down, called Qin from behind, offering her to go to bed with him if she was not afraid, promising a different development of the scenario. Having placed her foot on the body of the cocky guy, Qin herself was ready to punish him, but he was not worthy of such an honor. As if not paying attention to her boss, who was in a state of euphoria from what he had seen, Chin could only measure her strength with truly strong men. Judging the girl's look as too revealing, Yechen told about the discovery of correspondence with Zhong Wei on the guy's phone. General Manager Hua Xing was about to call the restaurateur on the phone in front of Qin Hongyan. Thinking back to the boss's 3-year marriage to his ex-wife, Qin had the impression that he was only interested in immature girls like Wang Jiayao. In Qin's understanding, Yechen had not yet been with a real woman, and until he tried it himself, he did not understand what the true charm of maturity was. When Zhong Wei started talking on the phone with the man who hadn't seen the restaurant boss for a long time, he thought of Xiao Sanzi. It wasn't the voice of a subordinate, so the restaurateur tried to find out who he was talking to and why a stranger was calling from Xiao Sanzi's phone. Grinning with the short memory of Boss Zhong, Ye Chen reminded the rich man of his vow 2 days ago to cut off his oxygen supply in Yunzhou, and now the man couldn't even recognize the voice. Having finally gotten to know the guy the restaurateur considered the trash son-in-law of the Wang family, he wanted to understand what his lower-class enemy wanted. Since it was Zhong who sent people to disrupt Ye Chen's restaurant, it was he who should be asking what Ye Chen wanted. Realizing that the guy had purchased the Cloud restaurant, Zhong Wei was seething with anger, knowing Ye Chen as a poor hanger-on from the Wang clan who had gotten the money from who knows where. Smiling, considering Ye Chen's actions to be revenge, Zhong, not knowing where he got the money to buy the restaurants, assured the guy that it was impossible to compete due to his own experience in business. Ye Chen was only happy to see the final result, mentally asking his competitor not to be angry if the guy responded to the dirty play in the same way. 20 minutes later, people began to gather near the Vnezemnoy restaurant in anticipation of the upcoming interesting events. Brother Arbuz came up with his fighters to report to Mr. Liu Jinkun about their complete assembly. Looking back at his subordinates, Mr. Liu relayed an order from the young master to give the extraterrestrial a little trouble, which was quickly accepted by the people. Upon learning of the visit of the foreign guests, Zhong Wei demanded that the kitchen chefs be told to do their best to provide the people with the highest quality service. Soon, a frightened waiter told the restaurateur about all the guests falling to the floor, foaming at the mouth, causing almost shock in Zhong himself. Having burst into the hall, the businessman stood in front of the guests lying on the floor without signs of life, demanding that an ambulance be called immediately. Once outside, Vice President Hua Xing looked at the extraterrestrial and could not understand the events that were happening there. People who witnessed the doctor's work spread rumors about the mass poisoning of several hundred foreigners from Southeast Asia, for whom there were not even enough doctors. Ye Chen knew about the end of the extraterrestrial, and Zhong, distraught with grief, was preparing to close it, because if even one person died from poisoning in the restaurant, the reputation would suffer an irreparable blow. After that, Ye Chen opened several karaoke clubs and establishments, and the people who threatened him at the Wang family anniversary began to go bankrupt, disappearing from Yunzhou. Half a month later, all members of the Wang clan gathered at the Shishan Villa for a family dinner. Sulen talked about the escape of the owner of the gold mine karaoke bar and Zheng Wei selling the extraterrestrial for pennies. Although they were recently prominent people in the city, but they have slid downhill. Remembering Zhong crawling to borrow money, Ji Qiang relayed his words about Ye Chen's revenge and the fact that he suffered while trying to intercede for the Wangs, although Chen was only a guard. Wenyuan called her sister a star, to whom Fang Chao had proposed 9 times in a row, and high society was only guessing when Jiayao would agree. The Fang family was spoken of by the grandmother as a good match, and Chao was in love with Jiayao, while the elderly lady received a call from the groom's father, complaining about the bride's refusals, which were damaging his family's reputation. Not wanting to delay any longer, since the Fang family was a springboard for Jiayao, and she couldn't let Ye Chen ruin her plans, so tomorrow at the concert the girl would agree to the wedding. The delighted grandmother, along with the rest of the relatives, raised their glasses in anticipation of the celebration and congratulated the girl in advance. Suddenly looking at everyone present, Yuan Ban noted her brother's absence with concern. Xiao Jai, who had spoken with Ye Chen, reported to him about the announcement made at the Jiayao family dinner to accept Fang Chao's proposals at the concert tomorrow, offering to disrupt the celebration. Sensing Ye Chen's friendship with influential people, since Mr. Liu and Watermelon trembled before him, Xiao had to protect Jiayao from making a mistake, so he was ready to set her straight. Xiao didn't understand Ye Chen's order not to interfere, since both he and Fan were crossing the freeloader's path. But Chen had dealt with his relative well, and if Chao wasn't harmed, he would be offended. Ye Chen, who was in the office, asked Xiao Jai not to worry, promising to make Fang Chao's fate much more pitiful than that of his ex-wife's brother. Urging Ye Chen not to worry, Xiao recounted how Jia Yao had spent the nights alone at home during these days, and during the daytime she would walk through crowded places or visit company. If that was the case, it didn't concern Ye Chen. Xiao understood everything. His former relative was acting like an ice block, but he hoped for the lack of connection between Jia Yao and Xiao. Not expecting such deep thoughts from Xiao Yechen, he praised the guy for his success and was ready to listen further when Ye promised an even more intelligent speech. Xiao's new proposal was for Ye Chen to marry his younger sister, who would make an ideal wife capable of bearing a son. After this initiative, the CEO of Huaxing Corporation did not want to talk to Xiaoji anymore and hung up. Looking at the smartphone display, the young man studied the contents of the messages sent to him by his former relative. In the first notification, the persistent Xiao Jai showed the guy intimate selfies of his sister, stealing them directly from her phone. Xiao, inquiring about Ye Chen's opinion, agreed that Jia Yao was beautiful and pointed out Yuan Yuan's charming figure, which was impossible to tear oneself away from. After studying such notifications, Ye Chen had mixed feelings about their sender. As he dozed off, the young man remembered Jia Yao, who was finally getting married to Fang Chao and now had the opportunity to be with him. At the evening concert, the God of Song announced the next composition, requested by one of his fans for the girl with whom he was madly in love. Wanting to dedicate the track Love Letter to his beloved lady, Wang Jiayao, Fang Chao wanted to take the opportunity to ask her an important question. To the thunderous cheers of the audience, Fan knelt down and asked Jiayao to marry him, and the people around him loudly demanded that he say yes to the young man. Qin Hongyan heard people admire the luxury of the stone on the ring and were touched by the fact that the proposal was made at the concert. Wang Jiayao, who became the center of attention at the stadium with thousands of people, accepted the ring box and answered Fang Chao with consent. To Qin, who was oblivious to the cheering crowd, the connection between Ye Chen and Jiayao was clearly severed forever. As Qin Hongyan left the stadium where the concert was taking place, she thought of Ye Chen, wishing she could take this amazing man for herself. Opening the door of the Rose Villa at 11 o'clock in the evening, Ye Chen was surprised to see Qin Hongyan standing there in the pouring rain. After apologizing to President Yi, the girl told about her trip to the God of Song concert, where she found herself stuck in a traffic jam on the way back, where it took half an hour just to leave the stadium. In a warm and cozy room, the hospitable host offered his guest a towel to dry her wet hair, for which she thanked him. As if by chance, Qin told President Huaxing about Fang Chao's proposal at Jia Yao's concert, and she agreed. Not expecting this, Ye Chen silently looked away, chewing over what his deputy had said. Having declared his revenge on the Fang family open, Ye Chen knew that as a first-class family in Yunzhou, it would take time to prepare for the wedding. But before the lovers exchanged vows, the guy sent the Fang clan to the bottom. When the boss asked Qin to tell him the whole background of the Fang family, she named the groom's father, Jianzhu, as the head of the family, and the foundation of his empire was the Yijia chain of budget hotels. The Fan family owned more than 20 hotels in Yunzhou and beyond, and the hotel brand had previously been listed on the stock exchange with a market capitalization of over 100 billion, but now it is no more than 3 billion. The Fan family tried to occupy a niche between budget and premium hotels, initially buying everything they could, even in small towns. If it weren't for the kind Uncle de Brule, they wouldn't have been able to break even. A surprised Qin didn't know how her boss knew the hotel business guru, Paul de Brule, but Chen had already called his uncle, inquiring about his affairs and health. On the other end of the line, the man calling Chen Chris relayed his grandfather's words about the boy overcoming the challenge of being a poor son-in-law and being ready to turn the business around, which Chen agreed with. When Chen told his friend about the Yijia hotel chain, the friend remembered it. Knowing the owner, Fan, who was going through hard times, he asked his uncle for help. Uncle initially thought that Chen wanted him to pull Fan out of the pit, but the young man, on the contrary, wanted the Fan family to descend into complete collapse. If the future head of the Ye clan needed his uncle's help, he wouldn't refuse, and poor Fan was crossing the wrong person, so the job would be done. For Qin, President Ye was a truly frightening figure. One call from him could send an entire empire into the world. Pointing out the time it would take for the Fang family's investment to fail if its leader, Xianzhu, took de Brule's advice, Qin spoke of Chao and Jia Yao's wedding in a month. The girl just looked in surprise at the boss, who, being aware of this, instructed people to deal with this issue. Late in the evening, in one of the city's gyms, Mr. Liu Zhengkun inquired about the health of the fighters who were recovering from their injuries. The boss's new order for the boys was to take women or rent rooms themselves in hotels, a list of which Liu sent to the group. Having instructed the hoteliers to find cameras in the rooms and download the recordings, and if they weren't there, Liu demanded that they install their own and post videos of intimate games with women online. This way, the owner would hit the hotelier where it hurts the most. Having praised President Ye for his thoughtfulness, Chin picked up the papers to continue resolving work issues. Fan Chao didn't work in his father's company. He took a couple of $100 million by dabbling in investments. He had an older brother, but he was just expecting an inheritance. But there was one person Ye Chen had to fear, and that was Fang Chao's mother and Yanzu's legal wife, Liu Ruxi. This striking lady was originally from the influential Liu clan, whose representatives lived in the city of Tianhai. This woman, before whom people bowed, had very serious connections, and therefore it was necessary to be extremely careful with her. After looking at the photos of Fang Chao's mother, Ye Chen would never have thought that this villain had such a beautiful mother, and that he did not inherit any family genes from her. Chao took after his father, and high society considered Fang Xiansu unworthy of Liu Juxi, whose family was richer, but the man had acquired the lady through dirty intrigues. Having asked the girl not to take this Liu family into account, Ye Chen considered them too insignificant to be afraid of them. A week later, Chao was driving his car, screaming at the news of Chicheng's bankruptcy, the stable company that had fallen to the bottom, and all the companies he had invested in were going under. After telling his father about his recent bad luck and the liquidation of all the companies in which he had invested his money, Chao asked him for another $100 million. Jianzhu himself needed money. A couple of days ago, hotel guru De Brule advised reopening their closed hotels, launching hotels in lower-tier cities. The surprised Chao reminded his father how De Brule himself had previously been against such a measure. But Xianzhu pointed to new times, and Paul De Brule himself had advised it. According to Chao's calculations, up to $2 billion had to be invested there, and in case of failure, the Fan family would go bankrupt. De Brule's advice could lead them to poverty. The indignant father did not want to listen to his son's recommendations, promising to give him $500 million, but not wanting any more of his moralizing. Sitting in the car with Jiayao, Fang Chao thanked his father with a smile, promising to turn $500 million into $5 billion. When the bride asked about the reasons for such wild joy, the groom replied about his father's intention to give him another $500 million. Chao asked the girl's opinion on how she would be the future Mrs. Fang, promising to soon turn $500 million into $5 billion, and she noted the generosity of his father. The laughing Chao was sure that her ex-husband's father wouldn't have found even $50,000, and the girl offered to change their title if they got married. Hearing the word husband, Jiayao thought about how she had only called Ye Chen that for the past 3 years. They were once a good couple, if only Ye Chen had not been a poor hanger-on. But Jiayao did not want to call anyone else her husband. Apparently, they were not destined to be together, and Jiayao asked her fiancé to take her to Huasheng to personally present the invitation to President Ye and Qin Hongyan. Having immediately agreed, Chao inquired about Ye Chen's possible invitation, but the girl did not want to invite her ex-husband to the wedding. But this was the main pleasure for Chao, who asked the bride for an extra invitation for Ye Chen. By inviting Ye Chen to come and see a truly lavish wedding, Chao wanted to see his rival shed crocodile tears when he was kicked out the door. Chao was overwhelmed by his problems. All the companies he had invested in had gone bankrupt, so he invited Jiayao to stay overnight with him to help him relieve stress. Referring to Grandma Wang's words about the inadmissibility of living together before marriage, Jiayao asked her gentleman to be patient a little. Their wedding was in a week. Dissatisfied with the girl's grandmother's conservatism, Fang Chao was upset by the bride's cunning, who did not even allow herself to be touched. As they drove to the Huasheng Corporation office, Jiayao silently asked Ye Chen not to blame Chao Fang for her choice. In fact, she also liked her ex-husband. It was just that, in her understanding, Chen Yu was too far from the Fan family and the timing was to blame, since they met at the wrong time. Qin Hongyan thought that Madame Fang's appearance was beautiful, and her status as the future wife of a billionaire gave her an air of elegance. After thanking him for the compliment, Jiayao was about to hand over the wedding invitation to Qin and President Ye, but was asked about setting a date. When Jiayao was about to hand over the invitation, she pointed to the wedding day as May 12th, exactly 1 week from now. Looking at the invitation, Qin Hongyan remembered May 12th as her boss Ye Chen's birthday. Jiao wondered where the vice president got such knowledge, and Qin remembered it as she had previously seen the passport of a boy who shared her father's birthday. In Qin's opinion, it was a cruel decision for Mrs. Fang to marry on her ex-husband's birthday, allowing her to forget about the date. Remembering Ye Chen's birthday, Jiayao begged the Fang family to postpone the wedding, but Chao refused, promising to make sure his rival remembered that day as a day of shame. Hoping to catch the president in his office, Wang Jiayao wanted to convey to him a wedding invitation. Qin suggested that the guest go to the boss's office, since she was already married to Chao, so let her find out who the head of the company really was. Knocking on the door of President Ye's office, the girl heard an invitation to come inside. Seeing CEO Huasheng from behind, she couldn't understand why he looked so much like someone she knew from that angle. Recognizing the guy in front as Ye Chen, Jiayao asked for President Ye, to whom she wanted to give the invitation. When the boy turned around and asked him about his purpose in the office, Jiayao asked him to convey the invitation to the president when he returned. The invitation announced a wedding on May 12th at a hotel in the city, and everyone knew President Ye, a pillar of the Yunzhou business world, whom the Wang and Fang families dreamed of meeting. Jiayao confided in the young man about choosing a wedding date on his birthday, May 12th. Noticing the guy's creepy look, the girl asked him not to look at her with such a gaze. She hadn't chosen the date. With a smile, Ye Chen wanted to make sure that his ex-wife was confident that she did not want to seek death by getting married on his birthday. When Jiayao was about to hand the boy the invitation specifically for him, Ye Chen thought of her as a bitch. After reading the invitation, where the author invited Ye Chen to the wedding, if he considered himself a man so that he could watch the luxurious wedding, the guy recognized Chao's handwriting. Having received the invitation, Chen suggested that the girl leave, and she, seeing his choice, congratulated him on the fulfillment of his dream. Deciding to give vent to her feelings, Jiayao began asking her ex-husband not to come to her new wedding. The girl knew how much Ye Chen still loved her, so he could feel pain at events, get drunk and start a fight, which only disgraced you. Waving his hands, Chen asked not to think of him as someone who was going to ruin the wedding. It was too much of an honor for Jiayao, but if Chao wanted to see him, the guy would come. As she watched Ye Chen leave, the girl noticed something eerie in his smile that sent shivers down her spine. After completing her task of distributing wedding invitations, Wang Jiayao walked out of the Huasheng Corporation office. In Chen's opinion, Chao had asked for it himself, deliberately scheduling the wedding on Ye Chen's birthday to mock the boy. Perceiving Chao as a fool for wanting to overshadow Ye Chen's birthday, the company director asked Chen to send out the date of his celebration to all business partners. Joyfully accepting the boss's order, Chen planned to throw a grand banquet for Ye Chen so that he would know her true feelings for him. At 6 in the morning on May 12th, Fan Chao was screaming in indignation at another collapse, although he had invested in a safe game that was blocked for violations. Over the past week, more than 10 of Fan Chao's profitable companies, who cursed at the top of their lungs, have gone bankrupt one after another. Futures, commodities, and an underground casino, all investments went down the drain. It was abnormal. But Chao lost almost all of his 500 million this way. According to my brother, Chao was deliberately drowned. He could have gotten in someone's way, because if you invest blindly, it's impossible to expect a 100% failure rate. Lost in thought, the guy couldn't remember any conflicts over the past 2 years, except for Ye Chen, whose wife he stole, but the rich man was too much for that trash. Since Chao's future wife was the first beauty of Yunzhou, many people liked her, so the groom could be taking revenge on a competitor, and Chao immediately thought of a certain old man who had a crush on Jiayao. Thinking with disappointment about his wife, who had only caused him losses, Fan had already lost $500 million, even though he hadn't even gotten married properly. Trying to calm Chao down, his brother asked him not to worry about losing $500 million. In the worst case, Fan would go to work for the family firm and live off his father. The main thing was that Chao had the beauty Jiayao in his arms, and that old man could have been the king of business. But on the love front, Fan overcame him, which he agreed with, wanting to call his beloved. Answering a call from her future husband, who was inquiring about her affairs, Wang Jiayao talked about trying on a wedding dress and making herself beautiful. Chao burst into laughter and asked his wife to sleep now, which would be better for her, because she would have to work hard at night. Song Hongyi, who witnessed this telephone conversation, wanted to find out from her friend what exactly Fang Chao had talked to her about. Chu Xiao, perceiving the groom as a vulgar man, would not have married him if not for his money, and Ye Chen always spoke tenderly to his wife. Song Hongyi thought it was strange that her friend was wearing a wedding dress and marrying another guy, but she praised her ex-husband. After today's wedding, Zhao was afraid of losing Ye Chen forever. But it was unknown what would happen if the girl divorced in a couple of years and he was still in a relationship. Taking her friend's hand, Song Hongye dared her to look at herself in the mirror, in front of which the bride was standing at that moment. With such a pretty face as Wang Jiayao, her friend thought that no man would dare to refuse her. Song Hongye asked her friend to believe her that she already had the man on her hook, and Ye Chen would be the girl's backup for the rest of her life. In the upscale Jiangnanli district, Liu Juxi told Shanzu about the risk of the company's expansion plan which had spent all the family's assets, although it was not worth trusting Paul. If the man hadn't trusted Paul earlier, the company would never have gone public, and Jianzhu didn't take a penny from his wife's family. She was ready to ask the family for money for the business. Jianzhu didn't need handouts from his wife, whose family had always looked down on him, but this time he wanted to prove his ability to rise from the ashes. Putting her hand on her husband's shoulder, Liu Jusi asked him not to think about business, because today was their son's wedding. In connection with Chao's desire to humiliate her ex-husband Jiayao at the wedding, Liu Jusi asked her husband to reason with her son, but for him this was not a great loss, and it was better to think about more important things. Shunzu knew about President Ye of Huashen's attendance at the wedding, so he asked his wife to give this mysterious figure a warm welcome, without under any circumstances losing face. Understanding her husband's orders perfectly, Lady Liu Jusi promised to discuss President Ye at the highest level if she could see him. Qin Hongyan and Ye Chen, who lived in the Rose Garden Villa area, were planning to leave for a wedding. According to Ye Chen's plan, today the entire Yunzhou would know that the president of the Huaxing Corporation was the abandoned son-in-law of the Wang family. The grinning Qin Hongyan would have given anything to be able to see Wang Jiao's face twisted in horror. An hour later, they arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Portman, where Xianzhu was already greeting President Zhao, happy to see him at his son's wedding. Xianzhu greeted both Chief Zheng and Vice Mayor Zhang, offering them a drink and expressing regret that he had not met them at the entrance, while Jiayao was amazed by the connections of the Fang family. Looking around, the girls were shocked by the appearance of President Ma himself, not expecting to see him here. Ma, who was among the top 20 richest people in the world, was the most important person in the country, and it is unclear why he was at the wedding of the son of the Fan family, which was not even in the top 10 in Yunzhou. Delighted by the visit of the richest man in the country, Xianzhu could not even dream that this gentleman decided to accept the invitation to attend the wedding. President Ma, who confessed frankly, came to the wedding to congratulate the newlyweds and meet with the head of the Huaxing Corporation, Mr. Ye. Impressed by President Ye's connections, if Mr. Ma wanted to meet him, Xianzhu would ask the guests to sit at the table, promising to find out where the head of the Huaxing company himself was. After thanking the hotelier with a smile, President Ma sat down at the table, and Jiayao came to the realization that everyone had come to their wedding to meet Mr. Ye. What kind of status and beauty does a girl have to become the wife of a man like President Yi? Taking a look at Fang Chao, who was smiling and standing next to him, his fiancée could only dream of such a thing. Hearing on the phone about the arrival of an important guest, Jianzhu promised to go to the entrance and meet him. Turning to his son, the father announced the arrival of President Yi and Vice President Qin, calling him to meet them at the door. People in the room talked about President Yi buying restaurants and clubs, ruining companies, when over the past month he sent dozens of firms into the wild. Hearing about the arrival of an important guest, whom even Mr. Ma had met and whom other people wanted to meet, Yuan and her grandmother also wanted to see President Ye. A luxurious white car pulled up in front of the hotel doors, carrying guests from Huaxing to the wedding. A young man in a suit stood bowing in front of Qin Hongyan, who opened the car door and stepped out onto the street. The astonished guest could not believe that the man who came out after her was the very same President Yi. Once she reached Mr. Fan, the girl introduced him to the head of the Huaxing Corporation, President Ye. Standing in front of everyone gathered for the wedding was Ye Chen, the CEO of a famous company, with a majestic bearing. Forgetting the bouquet of roses in her hands, the astonished Jiayao could not take her eyes off her ex-husband, who turned out to be President Yi. No less astonished, Song Hongye also couldn't understand why this influential person turned out to be Ye Chen. By Sun Tzu's own admission, President Ye's visit today was a great honor for him and his son. Looking at the guest, Liu Jusi did not imagine President Ye to be such a young and handsome guy. Upon seeing Mr. Fan's wife, the head of the Huaxing Corporation called her a beauty, for which he received gratitude from the father of today's groom. For Liu Jusi, the young man was too kind, and her cheeks burned from the praise of such a guy. Chao shouted and expressed his indignation at his alleged pretense of being the president, as he was simply Qin Hongyan's bodyguard. Just when he wanted to threaten the guy, Chao fell silent due to the advancement of President Ma, for whom it was a great honor to meet Mr. Ye personally. While shaking hands with Mr. Ma, Ye Chen learned that he was not acquainted with the Fang family, but had come to Yunzhou to meet with President Ye. Calling Ye Chen's grandfather his idol, whom he wanted to visit, Mr. Ma was afraid to disturb the old man, and the surprised Jiayao perceived their conversation as a mistake, not believing in their acquaintance. This time, Mr. Ma would like to exchange contacts with President Yi and would be happy to see him again in the future, which the guy did not object to. The guests present at the wedding were amazed that the richest man in the country, who stood at the top of Olympus, was the first to ask the young man for his phone number. Looking back towards Xiansu, Mr. Ma was forced to take his leave due to his intention to attend another important meeting, upsetting the unfortunate owner. Suddenly, in full view of everyone, a man collapsed on the floor, begging Mr. Ye to spare him. The guests recognized him as the general representative of Tuan Tuan in Yunzhou, Ma Kun, who was crawling at Ye Chen's feet for some reason, which amazed Fan. Ma Kun begged President Wu to return his representative rights, waited for half a month and learned from his boss that he had angered President Ye, but if he forgave Kun, he would get his job. Admitting his mistake, Kun regretted not recognizing the guy as a great man, whom he insulted but because of the Wang family, and he had no complaints about the guy himself. Ji Chang tried to confirm with Ma Kun whether he was sure that Ye Chen was the president of Ye, so that he would not break his forehead in front of an outsider. But this member of the Wang family was not in front of the guest, and President Wu himself told Ma Kun about the accumulation of rights by Ye Chen, and if it were not for Ji Chang, Kun would not have lived like this. Remembering that very phone call at the anniversary, the man now almost perceived it as real, and at that moment a man running to President Yi burst into the room. The man who admitted his guilt was recognized by everyone as the boss of Zhong from the Benazemni restaurant, whose business had been crushed by 7 Zobshchny establishments, and he was on the verge of bankruptcy. Pointing to the Wangs who had instigated him at the anniversary, when he had no choice, Zhong asked for forgiveness from President Yi, asking that he be considered no longer existing. A very nervous Fan Chao himself began to admit that Ye Chen really was the president of the Huaxing Corporation. Xiaojai urged anyone doubting his former son-in-law's status to take out their smartphones and use the Heavenly Eye app to find out who President Huaxing is. Following his recommendation, Jiayao and her fiancé grabbed the phones to identify the head of the huge corporation. After checking, Chao Fang couldn't believe it, thinking that Ye Chen's tenure as the company's president was a hell of a joke. Pretending to faint, Grandma Wang didn't want to face Ye Chen's gaze after the sensational information was revealed, causing Yuan to worry. It was now important for the old woman to find an excuse to leave to avoid Ye Chen's wrath. Zhi Yuan wanted to take her to the hospital, but Ji Chang pointed out his daughter's wedding to his brother, intending to personally take his mother to the clinic. Ji Chang grabbed his mother and carried her away from the celebration in front of his angry brother and his wife, forcing them to face Ye Chen's wrath. As if the one left alone, Wang Jiayao couldn't take her eyes off Ye Chen, thinking that he had come today only for her. Yuan appeared next to the guy, and he looked at her questioningly, wanting to make sure that it was really Ye Chen, the president of the Huaxing Corporation, in front of her. The cunning beauty could not even imagine that the man of her dreams had long been nearby and had secretly protected the girl for 3 whole years. Shielding Yesin with her body, Qin demanded that he stop hanging around with President Ye, but Yuan herself asked Yechen not to touch this old hag. Reminded of how he was her sister's husband, Yechen rightly didn't understand when he became the man of Yuan's dreams. For the girl, he was not a son-in-law. She recalled her father's words about her grandfather's initial desire to marry Yuan to Ye Chen. Yuan burst into tears and called herself the woman Ye Chen loved the most, and Ye Chen asked Hong Yan to order the guards to take her away. Jianzu thought things were bad because Ye Chen was Wang Jiao's ex-husband, allowing him to attend the wedding in order to disrupt it, and Mr. Ma had also left. In Liu Juxi's understanding, if Ye Chen had come simply to take the bride, it would have been half the trouble. He could have come for revenge for Chao, who had taken the guy's wife away. The woman approached President Ye and wanted to know whether his visit today was related to Wang Jiao or not. If the guy wanted, Liu Juxi allowed him to take Jiayao, who perceived Ye Chen's visit as an attempt to disrupt the wedding, and he was Huaxing's boss, who returned his ex-wife. Unexpectedly, President Ye, while agreeing that Ms. Wang Jiao was his ex-wife, had no further connection with her. At this time, Ji Chang, sitting in the passenger seat with his mother, demanded that the driver quickly go to the hospital. Suddenly, old lady Wang screamed in an inhuman voice, causing a feeling of wild fear in her son, who was surprised that his mother had not fainted. Only now did the woman understand why Ji Chang's father had made Ye Chen a hanger-on, and why she had driven the boy out of the family with her own hands, which would soon come to an end. After her son was slapped in the face, Liu Juxi was outraged by his disrespectful behavior towards a distinguished guest at the wedding and demanded that he apologize to President Yi. Fang Hao never thought that Ye Chen was President Ye. He wanted to humiliate him, but he disgraced himself in front of the whole city and now asked his enemy for forgiveness. Inviting the president to come inside, Jianzu promised to make his idiot son apologize publicly again as soon as the gentleman sat down on the chair. Turning towards Chao Fang, his father holding a glass in his hand, demanded that he not stand there in vain, but quickly pour President Ye some wine as an apology. The evil Chao, who had invited so many people from his circle, did not know how he would be able to look them in the eye in Yunzhou if he poured wine into a glass. Suddenly lost in thought, Chao couldn't understand what normal family in their right mind would give their son away to be a hanger-on. The real President Ye was hiding his face, so Ye Chen befriended Qin Hongyan to get help pretending to be the boss, and she had clearly been in a love affair with him for a long time. Chao believes that Qin may have applied to change the data in the heavenly eye, or they may have hired hackers. President Ma's appearance was also different from the one shown on TV. His height was also different. It was probably fake too. Ma Kun and Zhong Ye Chen were intimidated with his fists, and they played their roles. Chao Fan laughed softly and approached his father, who did not understand the reasons for his son's strange sense of humor. Chao called Ye Chen the one who pulled the wool over their eyes, and he was not the president, but an ordinary security guard who staged this whole show with Qin to make Jiayao bite his elbows. Angered by her son's behavior, Lu Jusi reminded him of how President Ma had treated CEO Ye. Confident in his rightness, Chao pointed out to his family the difference in the height and face of this President Ma from the appearance shown on television. The guests agreed with Chao, pointing out that the real Ma's chin wasn't as sharp and that his height was 1.50 meters, while this one was taller, and that the busy president clearly hadn't come to the wedding for just one person. Calling Chao an idiot, Qin doubted the possibility of faking the data in the heavenly eye, but in Fang's understanding, the lady could easily do it for show. Having called Chao names, Ma Kun, if he wanted to go under, demanded that he not drag along with the restaurateur Zhang, the villain who was outraged by the insults directed at Ye Chen and slept with his wife. Having found out about Zhang and Ma Kun, Fang called them trash and asked them not to think that he did not know about the amount of money Ye Chen had paid them, ordering the guards to drive out the two ill-wishers. The two men, while being spun around by the guards, continued to forgive and spare Ye Chaiyi, and Jiayao perceived this as a trap from her ex-husband. The girl begged Chen to stop. Today was not the day for pranks, and if the guy was indeed President Hua Sheng, then it was Jiayao's efforts to seduce Chao. If the thought that Chen isn't the president consoles them, then the guy agrees to it. He was pretending. He didn't want to crucify himself in front of two fools who were afraid of the truth. Sulan felt that Chen was incapable of being such a big face, and that he, the little rascal, had scared the woman to death. Just as Jiayao's mother was about to say that she believed in the sincerity of the words of the guy who had made it in life, and he had created a circus, she got hit on the head. Threatening her with his finger, Ji Yuan was amazed at his wife's desire to play with fire, but she continued to suspect the young man of pretending. The indignant husband did not object to Sulan's intention to get into trouble, but without the Wang family, promising to divorce her if she wanted to yell at Ye Chen. The astonished woman, faced with her husband's betrayal, could only hiss at him from the side. Since it was impossible to get to the bottom of the truth now, Jianzhu proposed to sort things out after the wedding, inviting guests to the table in view of the upcoming ceremony. Taking a seat next to President Ye, Qin Hongyan called everyone present idiots for doubting her boyfriend's status. According to Ye Chen himself, everyone believed in his true presidency, except for Jiayao, Sulan, and the Wang and Fang families. The lady only wanted to clarify for the others, but Ye Chen made a gesture to remind her of his birthday today, asking her to say something. Taking a glass of wine in her hands, the vice president of the Huaxing Corporation congratulated her Ye Chen on his birthday. Suddenly, someone appeared on the threshold and everyone was forced to look at this stranger, her one important guest. In a cheerful tone, Xianzhu announced the arrival of the famous Boss Huang, who was the president of Judu. Huang Chengming, who owned tens of billions, reminded President Fang of their only one meeting in the capital, and he still remembered it, amazed by his comrade's memory. Calling Jiayao and Fang Chao, Xianzhu asked them to thank Mr. Huang, whose visit to the wedding and gift were a huge asset to the family. Immediately apologizing, Huang Chengming explained to Mr. Fan that the gift was not intended for his son. Upset that Huan was not there for the wedding, Fan learned of another recipient for the gift, but the guest had a cash envelope for the groom. Chao suggested that Mr. Huang had a cigar humidor, and he confirmed this, admiring the young man's excellent eyesight. Huan, who asked his subordinates to buy a set of cigars, has poor English and couldn't read it correctly. It seems to be the Gurkha brand, but no one should be offended. Having heard of the brand as Gurkha Royal Courtesan Cigar, Chao knew that the most expensive examples cost more than 7 million. Mr. Huang put the figure at a little less than 7 million, but close to it, after which he began to apologize to Mr. Fan and the young people in order to leave on business. Addressing the high-ranking guests, the businessman congratulated President Ye on his birthday, intending to give him a set of cigars. Mr. Jianzhu and his relatives were greatly shocked by Huang's intention to give Ye Chen cigars worth several million as a gift. The girls were amazed, knowing about Mr. Chengming's habit of giving no more than 200,000 as a wedding gift, but the gift to Ye Chen was several times larger, which was clearly why he came. Shaking hands with the businessman, Ye Chen admired his generosity, but they had already become business partners, so expensive gifts were unnecessary. It was a mystery to Wang Wujiao why Huang Chengming would give such luxurious things to Ye Chen if he was not the real president. While people were watching the distinguished guests and the expensive gifts, they only heard the noise in the street at the last moment. Qin Hongyan, relaxing with a glass of drink, dreamily thought about the show that was just beginning here. When the servant reported to Mr. Fan that there were several dozen uninvited people at the entrance to the hall, the man demanded that they be thrown out. According to the servant, the people at the entrance called themselves businessmen and were ready to give 10,000 as a gift for the sake of attending the wedding. Shenzhou and his wife were in a state of mixed emotions, not knowing how to perceive the strange situation. With a wave of his hand, Shenzhou, in view of today being a great day for his son, ordered the staff to set up additional tables. Chao, addressing Jiao, pointed out that his father had some influence in Yunzhou's business circles, where small firms were constantly courting him. Jiao had a bad feeling about the wedding, as everything had been going wrong ever since Ye Chen's appearance. New guests from among the city's businessmen who appeared in the hall greeted Mr. Fan and congratulated him on his son's marriage. Chao found some of these people familiar, and Mr. Fan asked those who came to tell him about their companies and businesses. The names of Chicheng, Chanyu Online, and Sunsheng Health horrified Chao, as these were the very companies he had previously invested in. The screaming groom called them those same trash companies that suddenly went bankrupt and sent him packing. Chao hesitated when his father, shocked by his investments in bankrupt people, demanded to know the remaining amount of the money he had given him. After having a hard time reporting the loss of this money, Chao received an immediate punch in the face from his father. Outraged by his brat son, Mr. Fan was indignant at Chao's squandering of 500 million in a short period of time. Recalling Chao's words about receiving $500 million from her father, Jiao couldn't understand how the groom had managed to lose everything in the blink of an eye. The offended Chao blamed Ye Chen for his defeat, and some people who were dissatisfied with him left. Some guests asked President Ye for forgiveness, hoping for his mercy, but the girls only realized that many were at the party for the sake of the head of the corporation and not Fan. If this circus continued, the Fan family would no longer be able to live in Yunzhou, so Xiansu demanded that the new guests be expelled immediately. The indignant guests rightly pointed out that the 10,000 had been given as a gift, so the shameless Fan had no right to drive them away. Having ordered the guests to be given double their money, Xiansu thought about his family, who had been completely disgraced. Not knowing how Chao had crossed President Ye to make him so angry, causing him to lose $500 million, Xiansu believed that the man had lost no less. Ye Chen suggested that Xiansu ask his son about his bad deeds, asking him not to worry about money. For the guy, a couple of billion was no problem. Hearing this amount, Jiao called herself a complete idiot for divorcing Ye Chen to marry Feng Chao, if there were great forces behind her ex-husband. The Fan family had no chance of competing with the fabulously wealthy President Ye, but Shangzu knew, as the saying goes, that even a strong dragon could not defeat the local snake. Shansu, who had lived in Yunzhou for several decades, had many criminal figures who would not have been able to leave him if they had learned of the insult to his son Fan. Having nothing against the life lesson from Mr. Fan, Ye Chen was eager to see his criminal brothers. An angry Xianzu promised his rival what he wanted, and only Liu Juxi tried to stop her husband. Not wanting to listen to his wife's advice, the hated Xianzu threw her aside, and the unfortunate woman fell to the floor. To the surprise of everyone present, Ye Chen helped the lady to her feet, politely inquiring about her well-being. For the aggressive Chao, his mother's help from the enemy was terrifying, and Xianzu met approaching bandits on the street. In front of today's groom's father was Mr. Liu Zhangkun, along with Brother Watermelon and his accomplices. Xianzu welcomed the people, whom it was a great honor for him to see, with open arms, hoping for their help against the enemy. Before the man had time to reassure the guests that he didn't need gifts at all, they quickly moved forward. Left alone, Xianzu asked Mr. Liu to wait for him too, wanting to appear before President Ye together. Returning to the ceremonial hall, Xianzu only tried to introduce a couple of his criminal friends to Ye Chen, but did not even have time to name them. Suddenly rushing forward, Brother Watermelon, dressed in a respectable suit, began to congratulate Mr. Ye Chen on his birthday, holding a gift in his hands. Having bowed Mr. Liu, through whom the butler ordered gifts to be conveyed to the birthday boy, also congratulated the young master. Shocked by this unexpected turn of events, Jianzhu could not believe what was before his eyes. Smiling at the memory of his rival's desire to set his criminal friends on him, Ye Chen pointed at Watermelon and Mr. Liu, but Fang was just joking. Turning towards the guests, Ye Chen called for them to leave, as he himself had come here to drink to the health of the newlyweds and not to start a showdown. As he headed towards the exit, Mr. Liu quietly promised Mr. Fan that he would destroy his entire family if even one hair fell from the young master's head at the banquet. Watching Ye Chen go, people were amazed at his ability to control both legal business and crime, even when Liu Zhengkun worked for him, and anyone who dared to cross him would not have lived long. Those present at the celebration, who did not personally know President Yi, raised their glasses in honor of his birthday, perceiving the meeting with him as a sign of fate. Having expressed his gratitude for the congratulations, which he found pleasant, President Ye called the newlyweds the main heroes today, not wanting to steal the show. Ignoring Jia Yao and Fang Chao standing behind him, the young man planned to return to the office to conduct business as soon as he finished watching the wedding. The bewildered groom Chao, having witnessed Ye Chen's actions today, perceived it as outright revenge on his part. Jia Yao thought Ye Chen wanted to show everyone in Yunzhou how she had thrown away the pearl for the fisheye, and if she married Chao, she would become a laughingstock in the city.